the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast. This is a show where we help you become an even more awesome driving instructor by speaking with leaders, experts, innovators and game changers. As always, I am your host, Terry Cook, and I'm delighted to be here, but even more delighted that you have chosen to listen because we are back with some very special midweek bonus content, especially for you. So make sure you're subscribed or following the podcast because we'll be dropping special bonus content regularly on Thursdays whilst we're in between seasons. And that starts today with the Instructor Meginar, which was recorded live in the Instructor Podcast Facebook group back in January of this year, 2024. And it features 9 speakers, all delivering 20-minute presentations just for you. So this is a nice long episode for you to get stuck into, but I'm going to make it even longer by giving you a quick update. See, there was a third Meginar planned for August 2024, but unfortunately I've had to put that on hold due to some personal issues, but there are now Meginars 1 and 2 for you to go and get stuck into. I also want to point in the direction of the Instructor Podcast website. You'll find an absolute ton of resources to utilise. There's an events page where you can see what's coming up and a brand new feature, Pick Your Podcast, where you can filter through categories to find an episode that will help you in a certain area that you want to work on. And that's all available at www.theinstructorpodcast.com. But today, we've got the second Instructor Meginar. And as I mentioned, this was recorded live with 9 different speakers. And if you listen on Apple or Spotify, you can see and pick those speakers in the chapters of this episode. And on Spotify, you can also now leave comments on podcast episodes. And I really welcome you to do that. But for now, let's get stuck into the show.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here and a big thanks to Terry for putting this together. I am positive that this is quite stressful, but tonight I am here to speak to you about learning who your learner is. So this is me. Emma Cottington, qualified as an ADI in 2010. And the biggest thing on here is that I qualified as a journal therapist in 2020, and I started to look and delve into NLP in 2020 as well. And that's where a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today has come from. I've recently started to train as a counsellor, and I'm finding that there's a lot of stuff connected there with regards to relationships, human relationships, how we relate to each other. And I'm finding that I'm using more and more of this training with my learner drivers in helping them to develop their learning. So this is briefly what I'm going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to talk about driving instructor skills in a learning environment, knowing yourself and knowing your learner driver, IQ or EQ, and eventually down into transpersonal coaching. So this is a very brief overview of who I am. So everything in black is all the hats, all the many hats or masks, whichever way you want to look at this, that I wear, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis. And the point that I'm making with this is that every single one of us has many, many hats and masks that we present ourselves on to the people around us. And that includes your learner driver. And dependent on what mask or hat they're wearing when they get in the car on that particular day, will go towards how they show up for your driving lesson. The things that I've put in red on the outside are all of the pressures that come in on me on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So all of these things may come in and that might affect the mask that I'm wearing. That might in turn then affect how I show up in the mask that I'm wearing. And again, we can relate this to our learner drivers. So their masks might look like something like daughter, learner driver, sister, brother, student, co-worker, they might be working, all sorts of different things. And they might have all these different pressures, exam pressures, family pressures, that might be coming in on who they are and how they're going to present themselves as wearing a mask. So we're going to talk about how this might potentially affect how they show up for their driving lesson. So here's a cognitive triangle. Some of you may have come across this in training before now. And this is the understanding that our thoughts lead to our feelings, and ultimately that can then impact our behaviour, our outward presentation of our mask on that day. So for an example, this could be a learner driver turning up and has been in a collision many years before. Their thoughts are probably still with them from that incident. That can lead to increased feelings and emotions, and this can then play out in their behaviour. An example I've got at the moment is a lady who I'm training who is really, really struggling with dual carriageways. And we've took this back to her being 4. So we've worked right back and stripped her right back, and we've pinned it down to her being about age 4. And she's now in her mid-30s, learning to drive, and it's really playing out in her driving lessons when it comes to doing her dual carriageways. So we're really starting to dig now into that. So as driving instructors, quite often we're presented with the behaviour before we're presented with anything else. And that can be quite hard to then dig backwards and figure out. So my example with the lady I've got is that her behaviour was playing out in this dual carriageway. We could not figure out what was going on for her, where all of this was playing out. And then we've had to really strip down using my coaching skills to really find out where it was all going for her. I've also put at the top there about limiting beliefs or beliefs and learned behaviour. A lot of this can play into our thought process too. Limiting beliefs in particular, for example, a learner driver turning up and saying, I can't do this. I don't know. I'm not going to be able to learn to drive. I'm never going to be able to do this by myself. But with our effective coaching skills, we should be able to unpick this triangle and really strip back down to the feelings. And if we can target the feelings, we can generally unpick the rest and then start to help out with the behaviour. So our 5 essential coaching skills. So we've got rapport, questioning techniques, listening, intuition and feedback. And if we can kind of sort of dig into these, we can start to tackle that cognitive triangle, and we can start to really understand the person who's getting into our car. And we can start to understand the masks that they wear. We can start to understand the pressures that they've got before they even sit in our car. And from there, then we're able to help them with whatever they're going to present as their goal for the day, or if they've got something that they're particularly struggling with. What I will say here, something that I come across in training and actually in everyday life is terminology. I think it's one of the things that we can fall foul of sometimes, where we can fall into the trap of our terminology and us quite easily knowing what that is. I've done it myself with people where I've used sort of CPD is a key example. I remember having a conversation with an instructor in the test centre, and I said CPD in the conversation, and that person didn't understand what CPD meant. My best friend does it all the time. She's a nurse and she talks to me in nurse language. So she's telling me about the things that's gone on at work, and the terminology means that relationship has shut down straight away because I don't understand what she's talking about. Now, if we're not careful with terminology, then we've got to be, we're potentially breaking things like rapport. And it's those things that's going to help us to build up that relationship with our learner drivers. And then we can start to tackle feelings, because ultimately they're not going to want to start to dig deeper and unpick things that they're feeling if they don't feel safe to do that with the person that's trying to have this conversation with them. It's worth noting that 80% of our language is done through body language. So when we are communicating, if we're not using our intuition skills and our active listening skills, where we're watching people's body language for cues that we could be missing vital information about how that learner's actually feeling. And then also them being able to dig deeper into those feelings again to help and move forward. What I will say is I spoke a lot about understanding and knowing who your learner driver is, but I think it's key that we understand who we are as well, and we know who we are and how we're showing up that day, because we don't always show up in the same way every single day. I know I certainly don't. And, depending on what's maybe going on in another mask somewhere else in my life, maybe a mum pressure or a home pressure or whatever, can sometimes show up in the car if we're not careful. And I think it's really important that we recognise the difference between what's me and my stuff and what's them and their stuff, particularly if we're coming across trying to, unpick a problem for a learner and help them out. So some of the questions that I would, urge you to ask yourself is, when did you last check in with yourself? When did you really sort of sit and go, how am I feeling? What's causing me stress right now? What am I happy with? What am I not happy with? And ask yourself, when did I last have a rest? When did I last look at myself and figure out whether there's anything I need to look at or change? And really sort of go, what other masks am I bringing into this environment that I could be leaving at the door, or leaving before I've got into the car. It's really important to know your learner driver as much as we can, as much as we can do and ask without overstepping the mark. But as we build up that rapport using our coaching skills, then that rapport will actually start to build and build and build. And from there, we can get a little bit more about who they are. And the more we understand them, the more we can start relating to them. It's about us relating to them rather than them relating to us. And from there, we can really start to get this really blossoming relationship. We've got to remember that your learner driver is a human with a backstory of at least 17 years, depending on how old they are when they start. And that backstory could come with all sorts of collection of social, parental, and guidance norms. And their norms are going to look very different to your norms. What's normal for them is going to be very different to what might be normal for you. And we've got to remember that we don't want to set off teaching them English and they're thinking they're here for maths. We want to try and make sure that we're both on the same page, that we're trying working for the same goal. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a trainees counsellor at the moment, and that's big on relationship and how we work with each other, and the relationship around how we build that actually is the thing that's therapeutic, as opposed to the things that I've got to say. So the knowledge that I'm imparting or the conversation I've got going on isn't irrelevant, but isn't as important as the relationship I'm building, because without that relationship, I've not got that rapport and I've not got that ability then to bring up whatever to that level that learner driver needs. So the main skills from a counselling perspective is unconditional positive regard. So accepting that other person in this relationship for exactly as they turn up, whatever that might be, whether I agree with it or I don't agree with it, providing it doesn't make me feel unsafe. Congruence, so being as genuine as I can in that relationship, being as open and honest in my role in that relationship and asking for the same thing back from them. And empathy, so trying to understand them from their point of view so that I can help and support them as much as possible. And I really do think that these three skills really play out in the driving instructor role, my driving instructor role too. So I'm finding myself using these skills more and more as time's going on. So bridging the gap between the two, I think it's important that we remember sometimes when we sit back, I know sometimes I've got to do this and think, I do this every day. This is bread and butter for me. I do this every day. I turn up every day and I have done for the last 14 years. But for them, it's such a huge milestone. It's a huge, big deal for them. And we've got to stay present with it being a big deal for us too, that we've got this privilege of being able to teach them this big milestone that they're going to take with them forever. Because that can really change the dynamic if we're staying with that big milestone with them as well. And also allows us to be really present with them and really understand, why are they here? What is driving for them? What's typically their drive going to look like? What's driving life like for them beyond now? And again, going back to your essential coaching skills, that allows us to really dig underneath and figure out who this person is. Put an example on the screen there that I had a lady not so long ago who used to knit, and she actually related some of her driving to knitting. It made absolutely no sense to me at all, but through coaching conversations, I could understand, I could get on her page and understand how that related, despite the fact I know absolutely nothing about knitting. And it made a huge difference. It actually completely transformed how she was coming up to junctions. I don't know how, I couldn't explain it to you, but she absolutely understood what was going on. And as soon as she had that connection made with something in her own life, that made the biggest difference to who she was. So it's about finding what those barriers are and seeing if we can connect it to something outside of the car, something that's really important to them. So this kind of comes down now to emotional intelligence and IQ. So we're looking at EQ and IQ. So your IQ is your measure of ability to reason and to solve problems, which is absolutely something that we need in driver training and in life in general. And then your EQ is your measure of interpersonal skills and, more simply, your social skills. So how you're dealing with people on a relationship basis. So Daniel Goleman revolutionized emotional intelligence not so long ago. It's been through humanistic psychology for a long time. But the study is basically on human relationships and how we work and how we communicate together. And then when you compare this to education, Goleman's studies indicated that actually emotional intelligence is twice as important as any academic or technical knowledge that we could impart on anybody. So when we think about we're very academic, we're technical in the knowledge that we're providing the learner, which is absolutely important. But to think about the emotional intelligence and how we actually connect with that person being twice as important in that relationship, really got me digging deeper into this. So the 5 main skills according to Goleman is to know your own emotions, manage your own emotions, motivate yourself, recognize the emotions in others, and then handling the relationship. And again, I think we can make a lot of connections there with the essential coaching skills. So John Whitmore wrote a lot about this in Coaching for Performance as well. And there's a study in there if anybody's interested in reading it. It's towards the back in the transpersonal chapter. And he did a study with a group of people. And the questions in the study was to ask how, if they could look back into their childhood and recall one person who they felt was really influential in their life, and what qualities did that person have. And these are the things that everybody in the study, or most people in that study, listed that he could kind of collect from everybody as being as a collective. So it was treated me as an equal, listened to me and were interested in what my opinion is. They gave me the full time and attention. They challenged me. They believed in me. They believed I could do it. They were fun, enthusiastic, and made me laugh. I felt cared for, supported, and safe, and they respected me. And again, I think this links really nicely back into our essential coaching skills as well, because each of those, their aim and their goal is to achieve these outcomes in our relationship. But again, it's looping into that. It's not about what this person did for me that was important, but it was how they did it for me that was important, how they treated me as a person, as an individual, as myself in this scenario to allow me to move on. So why can this be so hard in driver training sometimes? Okay, so typically you'll learn a driver's education to this point has been through the school system. So at the point they get in your car, their only education's through a school system. The school system typically doesn't teach us EQ, nor does it lend to many EQ environments such as play and structured human interactive exercises. They've got very little experience of coaching skills that we're encouraged to use in our training all the time. So when they're very much used to, you tell me the stuff and I'll copy you. Very much chalk and talk. So we're thinking back to school. So when they get in our car, that can be really, really challenging and difficult because they're just not used to the way that we're trained now to help and interact with them in a learning environment. It's one of the many reasons that many of us can't recall a lot from our school education, particularly if you were interested in the subject. So if anybody was to ask me to recall anything in maths, we've got no chance. So transpersonal coaching, which is the sort of umbrella of all of this, is from humanistic psychology, the belief that humans are always striving for the best. And this can be achieved when we apply purpose, meaning, and direction to any task that we're trying to get through in life. So the purpose of a learner driver might be finding out why are they learning to drive? What is their purpose in learning to drive? Find out what their meaning is. So trying to find out what's this going to do for their life? What is it going to mean to their lives if they can drive? And then the direction. So again, linking back to your learner driver, what's this driving license going? Where's it going to take them? You know, what direction in life is this going to take them by having this driving license in their life? And if we can tackle just those 3 in a conversation, straight away we're starting to build that rapport, because straight away that person's getting in your car going, this person actually, wants to know why I'm here. They want to know why I want to learn to drive, and they're looking to stay on my page here, not on theirs. So for anybody who might be interested in knowing a bit more, I've added this at the end of my slides, because it's one of the things that pops up in humanistic psychology again. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this is the belief that every human is always striving to do their best. But to be able, according to this hierarchy, to be able to get to the top, to that self-actualization and become the best version of ourselves in whatever area of life we're trying to do that, we've got to have the correct support system and the right environment around us to be able to lift ourselves up and achieve that. So when we're thinking that this from driver training, we've got to think about where that support and what environment are we creating for our learner drivers so that they are able and in the best place to strive for their best. Okay, so in conclusion, my presentation today has been about getting in touch with your learner and trying to tap in a bit more about who they are, why they're here, and from there we're able to sort of tackle a little bit more of building that relationship up. Making connections between their behaviour, thoughts and emotions can go a really long way to developing their learning. It builds rapport, and that's coming from your foundation of your essential skills. Learners are much more likely to engage if you attempt to stay on their page rather than making them come over to yours all the time. And it's important that you know yourself. Have you been clear? Are you feeling okay today? Have you potentially missed something? So it's important that if something's breaking down somewhere, that you're able to sort of reflect on yourself as well, and get to know why they're in your car. Why are they sat there? What's their purpose, meaning and direction? And remember that emotional intelligence, building that relationship around anything, can actually be more important than the task that you're trying to achieve. And then I've just listed the resources there that I've been using for several years now. And if anybody's interested in knowing what any of those are, then let me know. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of the speakers tonight.
Look at that. Bang on 5:20. That's how we do it, Bob. Love that. A lot of love for that in the comments as well. So definitely go back and check out those comments. But I am unceremoniously going to kick you out now.
Bye.
And I am with ceremony going to bring in, fingers crossed that we can make this nice and smooth, just like we did last time. And I am bringing in Gemma Briggs. I'll just wait for her to bring up the video. But yes, cracking first presentation there from Emma Cottington. And it was good to see a lot of love in the comments there. Here we go. Sorry, Funky Dory.
Here I am.
Yes, so thank you for joining us today. You are someone that I have never spoken to. So very rudely, I'm going to say welcome. Do you want to share your screen for me? And we can chuck you straight in the deep end.
Okay.
Excellent. So I am going to disappear and I'll come back in about 20 minutes after you've done a wonderful presentation for us.
Brilliant. So you can see that. Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me along. I'm Professor Gemma Briggs. I'm a professor of applied cognitive psychology based at the Open University, and I've spent the last 15, 16 years researching driver distraction, specifically mobile phone use by drivers. I have a real interest in communicating these research findings to different audiences, so really happy to come along today to talk to you all. To talk about best practice, what we can do, and maybe provide you with a few surprising findings. We'll see. So what distracts drivers? Unsurprisingly, any activity which draws your attention away from the primary task of driving is a distractor. So you've all heard about different forms of distraction. So we can look at visual distraction, so taking your eyes away from the road. Auditory distraction, hearing something which captures your attention, and then, of course, perhaps taking your eyes away from the road. Manual distraction, physically holding, manipulating a phone, touching an infotainment system. And cognitive distraction. Cognitive distraction is the thing that I'm most interested in. That's about the attentional resources, the work that your brain needs to do in order to allow you to carry out a task. And that's what I've spent the last 15 or so years researching. You see from the images here, and you'll know far better than me, the amount of technology that's currently in our vehicles and emerging technology. So as technology advances, so too does the number of potential distractors for drivers. From a theoretical, cognitive, psychological perspective, we would describe driving as a complex task, in the sense that it requires multiple processes, lots of different brain areas. It uses all of your brain all of the time, and cognitive resources. And the thing to bear in mind is that our brains aren't computers. We process information amazingly, but we can slip up. And when we try and multitask, that's a particular problem. And we'll revisit that a little bit later when I talk through some of the research that I've carried out. So is phone use by drivers really a problem? I think we've probably all got an opinion on this. No prizes for guessing what my opinion is. But we know that we've got laws banning mobile phone use by drivers. We've had them in the UK since 2003. They were updated in 2017 and again in 2022. So handheld phone use is banned. We know that. Hands-free phone use, perfectly legal. Now, despite handheld phone use being banned for many, many years, on average, around a quarter of all drivers admit to illegal handheld use behind the wheel. And that's from the RAC report for motoring. It's been a similar level for the last 4 or 5 years. Occasionally it spikes. So around a quarter of drivers admitting to it. Now that's the average. Now, if you look at the chart here, which I've unceremoniously pinched from the RAC report for motoring 2023, you can see that the other age groups are a bit more problematic in that area. So those aged 17 to 24, 49% of drivers admitting to handheld phone use. And of course, that's a particular audience which probably encapsulates a lot of learner drivers. Now, these data don't say anything about how often people are using their phones. That we have got some measures of that. Around 12% of people in the RAC report for motoring recently said they use their phones regularly. And in another recent report, 3% of drivers admitted to handheld phone use on every journey in the past year that they'd taken. There's also some really worrying statistics about younger drivers' use of video calls behind the wheel. So is it a problem? Yes, it is. And it's a growing problem as technology emerges. So that's the problem. But we've also got a problem in that we're dealing with humans. Humans are really problematic. And driving humans are even worse. I say that as a driver myself. Now, the issue with drivers is that most drivers consider themselves to be above average at driving. If you look at the chart that I've got on the screen here, this is some data I collected a couple of years ago, 500 people. I asked them to rate their driving ability on a scale of 0, which is abysmal, to 100, which is perfect. And what do you know? We've got an average of 80%. No difference between males and females, an average of 80%. So statistically, this is possible in theory, but it's highly unlikely. Someone's going to be average, someone's going to be below average. The issue is that most drivers don't consider themselves to fall into that below average category. And this is what psychologists call self-enhancement bias, the belief that we as individuals have increased skill, and that increased skill mitigates any potential risks that we might take. So this might explain why we've got people who claim to support handheld mobile phone law, but nevertheless break it themselves. It might also explain why consistently mobile phone use by other drivers is rated as a top safety concern by motorists. We've got more problems in that drivers who see other drivers get caught using their handheld device and get punished, instead of thinking, oh, goodness, I should change my behaviour because I could get caught, this self-enhancement bias kicks in. They say, oh, well, this reassures me that I am better. I've not got caught. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that respect. It works in terms of crash risk optimism too. Drivers tend to think that if they're going to be involved in a crash, it won't be caused by them because they have superior driving ability. It'll be caused by someone else who has lesser driving ability. And therefore, there's no point in changing their own behaviour because it won't be caused by them in the first place. So we're in a really tricky situation in terms of mobile phone use by drivers, given all of this knowledge. Most people don't believe they're part of the problem, even if they know they're breaking the law. So with that in mind, let's look at some research findings on mobile phone use by drivers. So drivers using a phone are 4 times more likely to be involved in a collision than someone not using a phone. That effect persists for around 5 minutes after your phone use has ended. And that's what got me hooked into this many, many years ago, because I thought, well, why is that? And the reason that that's the case is it's to do with cognitive distraction. It's to do with what your brain is doing, not just where your eyes are pointing and what your hands are holding. Distracted drivers are far less likely to notice hazards. If they don't notice them, they're far less likely to react to them. Any hazards they do notice, they take significantly longer to react to. And that, of course, has implications for stopping distances. They tend to show poor lane discipline, variable speed choices. They use compensatory strategies, which is a polite way of saying they don't use their indicators and they don't check their mirrors. Many behaviours very similar to drink driving. And as a consequence of all of these things, distracted drivers have really poor situational awareness. And none of these factors are improved by using a hands-free kit. That might come as a surprise. You might not believe me. I'm very used to people not believing me, but I have spent a lot of time researching this. But in the next slide, I'm going to give you the opportunity to try something out and see what your own experience tells you. So on this next slide, I would like you to count the cars. Okay, so I'm in a slightly strange position of not being able to see people's reactions to that. But generally speaking, this is a demonstration of inattentional blindness. Generally speaking, you show someone, a group of people, a demonstration like that, around 40% of people won't notice the change. And that's really interesting because what you're doing is you're focusing your attention. Now, if you did notice the sign changing, well done. That tells us that you can focus your attention well, but you can also take in other information at the same time. Again, completely normal, but it's completely normal if you didn't notice it. If you did notice the sign changing, it's highly unlikely you noticed all of the other changes as well. Even though your eyes were pointing directly at it, you were looking directly at it the whole time, and you didn't necessarily take in all of that information. Now, it's really important that we can focus our attention like that, but it's a nice demonstration, I think, that we can look but fail to see. And this is the premise of all of my research on mobile phone use, on hands-free mobile phone use. And this is really important because it's all about how we apply our attention. It's got nothing to do with our driving ability. It's so that self-enhancement bias we need to understand and we need to bear it in mind, but it's got nothing to do with how we apply our attention. So as I said at the start, our brains don't work like computers. We don't divide 2 kind of channels of attention when we try and talk on the phone and drive at the same time. We actually switch our attention to and fro between those tasks. And there's a lag when we do that, when we return to the original task. Our brains are really clever things. They fill in the gaps for us. But unfortunately, that means we can miss information that's actually happening and we're not processing it. So I might have convinced some of you, I might not have convinced others. And a question that you might be asking was, well, hang on, how is hands-free phone use any different from talking to a passenger? It's a really good question. It makes a lot of sense. I've stuck a QR code on the screen here that you are free to scan to a resource that I made along with BBC Ideas, which talks specifically about a study that I did in this regard that I won't have time to talk about today. But essentially, the issue is shared environment. Someone in the vehicle with you can see what you can do, what you can see. They'll regulate their demands on your attention by regulating their conversation. They might even help you out by pointing out, have you seen this? Have you seen X, Y, Z? Someone on the phone doesn't have the benefit of that shared environment and so will consistently demand your precious attention. It's also the case that when we speak to someone who isn't physically present with us, our brain reacts differently. We tend to create mental images of where they are, what they're discussing, what they're up to. And the brain areas and cognitive resources needed to achieve those mental images are the same areas needed for accurate visual perception of that driving situation. And this can explain why we can look but fail to see. So we've done lots of research in this area where we've tracked people's eye movements. We can see that they are looking directly at a hazard, yet they don't react to it. They don't react to it because they haven't had the experience of seeing it. It hasn't reached their perceptual awareness. So the key message from research here in terms of eye movements is that distracted drivers look around the scene far less. They can look directly at a hazard yet fail to see it. They look at an area of the driving scene 4 times smaller than undistracted drivers. And they're particularly bad at hazards in the peripheral areas, the things at the side. So think about what that is. Someone stepping off a pavement. Highly unlikely to notice that because they tend to focus their visual attention directly ahead of them, just above their bonnet. But even if we whack a hazard right there where their eyes are demonstrably pointing, they won't see it. They look, but they fail to see. And you might be saying, well, but what if I'm a professional driver? What if I've had advanced driver training? My driving could be unaffected by phone use in this regard. Well, I've kind of alluded to the fact that it doesn't really matter. It's about how your brain works rather than your driving ability. But this comes down to situational awareness. We need to be able to keep track of other vehicles and other road users and the whole driving situation. We need to make predictions based on past experience. We need to also pay attention in the moment so that we can make quick judgments, quick decisions, and quick maneuvers. But drivers on the phone have really poor situational awareness. They tend to over-rely on what they expect to happen in that driving situation compared to what's actually happening in front of their eyes. And again, we won't have time to talk about it today, but we've done lots of research in this area where we've done things, for example, like flashed up either driving related things into a scene like a road sign or driving unrelated things like a big whopping great smiley face in the middle of the scene. And our distracted drivers don't notice the smiley faces. They don't notice many of the road signs, but they're more likely to notice road signs than they are smiley faces because they expect to see road signs in a driving situation. If we dispense with those things and just make their vehicle do things that run contrary to expectations, like stop at a green traffic light, give way to the wrong side on a roundabout, our distracted drivers don't notice it consistently. So they're relying on what they expect to happen in that situation, not what is actually happening in front of their eyes. And this has implications for their stopping distances, if indeed they react at all. So the key messages from research in terms of driver distraction is that both handheld and hands-free phone use lead to increased crash risk, failure to notice hazards, increased stopping distances. Core distraction is cognitive. Of course, you shouldn't be physically holding and manipulating a device. Of course, that's distracting, but simply removing the need to touch or look at a device does nothing to eliminate cognitive distraction. So the law is problematic in this regard. Hands-free mobile phone use is qualitatively different from talking to a passenger, but if you don't have any kind of collision, you don't have any screeching brakes, you don't have anything that makes this highly salient and obvious to you, you are unaware of how unaware you are, which is why lots of people will resist research findings in this area. They'll say, well, hang on, I've never had an accident, I've never had a collision, and I use my hands-free all the time. They're unaware, it's called the illusion of awareness. They're unaware of how many other road users have changed their behaviour to mitigate the risk that they're imposing by their distracted driving. Their brains are filling in the gaps for them, so they have the subjective experience of everything being safe, everything being fine, but the reality can be quite different. And if you're particularly interested in challenges and responses to those challenges, we've got a paper that we published a couple of years ago, and I've got a link at the end. So then we've got the problem with drivers, but we've got the problem with learner and newly qualified drivers. Top problem, they're still learning. And of course, it takes time, energy, cognitive processing in order to learn. So learner drivers already have much higher processing demands on their brains because they're trying to learn this new information. They're trying to build up that ability to have good situational awareness. They can't process the scene in what psychologists would call a top-down fashion. They can't use experience, past experience, to help them understand a scene. They have to process it bottom up in the sense that they need to take in all of the different aspects of the scene and build a mental image of what's going on there. That takes time. We're not consciously aware that that's how we learn, that that's what we do, but that is indeed what happens. And that's what happens without any distraction. So if you throw a mobile phone into the mix at the same time, hopefully you'd appreciate that that means cognitive overload. So there's lots of research in this area about how poor learner drivers are in terms of situational awareness, understandably. The issue is that we're talking increasingly about generations of learner drivers who have been born with smartphones in their hands, essentially. The phone is always there. So it's always the issue. What came first, the smartphone or the car? In most cases now in learner drivers, the smartphone. And the assumption is, I always have my phone with me. Of course I can interact with it. And if the law tells me that using it hands-free is safe, then why wouldn't I do it? In terms of newly qualified drivers, younger drivers, as we said at the start, are the ones who are most likely to use their phone whilst driving. They are also the most affected by social norms and pressures. Their friends, they think their friends will expect them to use their phones. They don't want FOMO. They don't want fear of missing out on any information that's coming their way, any invites, any texts, whatever. And therefore, there's that pressure to use a phone, even if they understand the consequences of doing so. If they've got passengers in their vehicle, they're more likely to use a phone and be distracted, particularly if those passengers are in their peer group, same age. Those who understand the dangers of phone use, they know the dangers, they understand the legal ramifications if they're caught, tend not to compare their behaviour if they use their phone with other people like them. They tend to say, yeah, but it's not as bad as other more dangerous behaviour. So they kind of move the social comparison goalpost to make themselves feel better about it. They often believe that they can mitigate risk by altering their behaviour, whether that's hiding their phone use. So concealed phone use is a big research area at the moment, or just saying, oh, I only use it on long straight roads. So what can instructors do? I'm conscious of time. Can make clear to learner drivers the legal consequences of getting caught. And I'm sure that's what's already done anyway. But perhaps offer some education on the equal dangers of hands-free. Don't encourage a shift from one dangerous form of a behaviour to the other. Legality doesn't equate to safety in this instance. Demonstrate best practice yourself. Don't use your hands-free kit whilst driving. And encourage thought around strategy for when people do need to use their phones, because at times they will. So plan stops, work out how they're going to do it. We've got some education available, free available education, gamified, bit like the thing that I asked you to do at the start with counting the cars. So if you'd like to, you can link to these things, you can try them out, and you're very welcome to share them. That's a list of my resources, and I'm really happy to answer any questions. There's all my details. Please feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
I'll tell you what, we set in the standard high with these first two. That was another awesome presentation, so thank you. If you just want to unshare your screen to me, that would be brilliant. And again, I get to feel very, very rude by basically having never spoke to you before, get you in, get you to talk 20 minutes, then essentially just kick you out. But I will say, you will have me pestering you shortly to come on my podcast to go into more detail. So a lot of things there, you said, we haven't got time now. So yes, you'll be hearing from me at some point in the future. So big thank you for coming on today, Gemma. And yes, you're welcome to go and share any links or answer any comments in the question.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more from the Instructor Meginar in just a moment, but I want to point you in the direction of the Instructor Podcast Premium, which is often referred to by its members as the best value CPD available to driving instructors. For example, so far in June and July, we've had Tom Stenson talk us through identifying where we need to improve. Becky Seaton shared her top 5 tips on how to bounce back from a standards check or part 3 fail. Phil Cowler discussed a standards check competency where the pupil's queries followed up and answered, and Ray Seagrave makes Q&A, conversation and presentation to discuss behaviours versus skills. There are also presentations from Lee Sperry and Sophie Lydon, plus a weekly series from me digging into the nitty-gritty of being an ADI. All that, and we're only halfway through July. Now there's 2 membership levels, £10 and £22, both plus VAT, with a week's free trial available on the £10 tier. So use the link in the show notes to sign up, or head to www.theinstructorpodcast.com to find out more. And I'm going to bring in the next guest. And just while I am, you can see there we had Gemma Briggs on. Last time we had Hayden Jenkins is here as well. Last time we've had Elizabeth Box on, and that's all leading up to something coming up later on this year, which I'm calling Driving Instructors to Vision Zero. So there we go, but that is coming up later, so less about that now. Hayden, do you need to share your screen?
I haven't got a presentation as such to display with you.
We
so you'll
are
have to
just
see
getting...
my face for the next 20 minutes.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is a treat for us all. So I will disappear and I will let you take over. And if you can be able to wrapping up about 6 o'clock or just after, that would be amazing.
I was conscious of not doing death by PowerPoint.
Fair enough.
Okay, some of you will know me. I've been in ADI since 1991. When I qualified, I started my own business in 1992. And from the early days, I was getting a lot of clients with disabilities and special needs, specific needs. And so I branched into teaching people with specific needs and disabilities, and I've been doing that for the last 30 odd years. I think it's the most rewarding sector of the community. Myself and John Rogers met in about 2010 when he ran a course at Derby. And both him and I were coming at the problem of getting driving instructors in touch with other people. And the people who needed us couldn't find us. And I was looking at how we could get ADIs publicised. And John was doing the same thing, but from another direction. I started by starting a Facebook group called ADIs with and for disabilities. And that started with, I think, 6 invited people and is now over 2,500 members. But the idea was that when I got an inquiry from somewhere strange, I could put a message up and see if anyone could help me out and give this person some tuition in an adapted car. John was coming at the same problem, but from another way of developing the website, which we've got, which is www.disabilitydrivinginstructors.com. And that website brings in business to everyone who's been put on it. It's only a basic, I think it's £30 for the basic entry and £50 for the enhanced entry, which most people I know are getting lots and lots of business from it. The other thing we were trying to develop over the last 10 or 15 years is education courses for people who want to get into teaching special educational needs and disabilities. And we've run 2 of those courses so far, and we're due to run another one starting on the 9th of April, which is our specific educational needs course. That's 5 units online. And then on the 14th of May, we're starting our medical needs course, and that's 6 units online. And that will be followed by a practical hands-on day with driving instructors driving with adaptations and seeing how they work. I've always believed that the education side of this needed to be done because, okay, someone's willing to teach someone with educational needs or disabilities, but where do they start? How do they get the information? Well, one way is joining my group, ADIs with and for disabilities Facebook group. The other way is getting yourself on one of the training courses. It doesn't have to be ours. Other people do provide training courses like the QEF and some of the other mobility assessment centres. But it's been very difficult to get the educational course online. We tried organising it through driving instructors associations. That didn't work very well. And then we tried to develop it ourselves, which is to say we've run 2 courses successfully. All the people who've done the courses have been very enthusiastic about what they've learned and what, in fact, we had one guy who'd worked for the NHS for several years, said he learned more on our course than he'd done working for the NHS for 10 years. Now, I think that's quite an interesting comment from somebody that they've learned that much from a course which is online. It's about 2 hours per session. Sometimes we run over to 2.5 hours per session. We cover everything on the specific educational needs course, from dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism. And on that one, we also have a lady joined us who was one of my ex-pupils. And she came on originally as a case study because although she's a assessor for people with autism, she's also dyspraxic and got a physical disability as well. I taught her to drive last year. Took about 6 months, I think. But she was then coming in and explaining how difficult it was and what she needed to learn and how she needed to learn and how we found the way to get through to that learning point that no other driving instructor up until she met me had managed to do. She'd had several driving instructors over the last 10, 15 years. I don't want to be big-headed, but I found the way that worked for her. And we got a third test, not on a first attempt, but we did get a third test. And she's going to rejoin us on the course and bring her expertise of autism to our course, hopefully in May and April. And that will benefit everyone who enters the course. Teaching clients with special educational needs and disabilities is one of the most rewarding things. I've often come away from the test centre with a smile on my face that lasts for hours. And sometimes I've actually come away from the test centre with tears in my eyes because it's been such an emotional experience for the learner and me, and sometimes the examiners. It sounds strange to say this, but I've seen examiners with tears in their eyes as well. As I say, it's one of the things you can't really, it's very emotional. One of the ones I had, and I'll just talk about this briefly to give you an idea of why it's special to me. I had a lady who took 7 years to learn to drive. She got cerebral palsy and she'd also got educational needs. She was ready for a test well before she would take it. We had to keep pushing her and pushing her and pushing her to put in for a driving test. During that 7 years, she had an operation to release some tendons in her arm. So she took about 6 or 8 months off tuition, and then she came back. And when she took her driving test, I sat in the back, as I often do with many of my clients. And that lady cried all the way home, and I cried too. As I say, it was a 7-year journey from start to finish of trying to teach her. Because she got paralyzed down one side, she could only use her one arm and one leg to drive. So she was using the left arm and left leg to drive, using a Lodson special auxiliary control unit and a left foot gas pedal and left foot braking. The examiner wasn't able to tell, apart from what we told him, that there was anything going on below the waist down. And speaking to the examiners, what I often do is I talk to the examiners before the test by sending them some test notes. And if necessary, I'll go in and have a chat with them and explain what adaptations we're using and what we need to get the test done. Sometimes my clients need a rest break in the middle due to fatigue. That is acceptable. A lot of people don't understand the disability test. They think that people are being given an easier ride. The test is exactly the same. All the examiner is doing is making reasonable adjustments for the client's educational needs or disabilities. The test is exactly the same. So if the client requires a 10-minute break in the middle, the examiner will time that so the amount of driving is exactly the same as a standard driving test. As I say, the only allowances, they will give instructions earlier, they will point to help with directions if someone has left and right confusion. And if we're using adaptations, and there are some show me, tell me questions that cannot be answered on the move, by a client using adaptations. So we have to tell them, obviously there are some that have to be done, front wipers and washers, horn, indicators, high-low beams, those are required by law to be able to be operated at all times. So those are the minimum ones we would do on test. But some of the other ones, like opening and closing the driver's window, to be perfectly honest, that's not a safety critical thing. So we would ask the examiner not to ask that question, because if the person is driving with hand controls, they've got one hand on the accelerator and the brake and one hand on the steering. So they haven't got a third hand to open and close the driver's window. It's very difficult to get this over to other people, that, and a lot of people still think this, that disability driving test is easier. It's not. It's exactly the same. I've sat in the back of many. For many, it's much harder, especially if someone's got severe anxiety. We're not talking about they've got a few butterflies in their stomach. We're talking about people who are physically affected by their anxiety. And I know Diane Hall, and she's got some techniques that work for these situations, and they work very well. And I've used some of her techniques and some of my own techniques that I've developed over the last 30 odd years. If you want to look at the website, it's www.disabilitydrivinginstructors.com. As I say, a basic listing is, I think, £30 for the year. A enhanced listing is £50 for the year. Also, you can join our group, ADIs with and for disability. All the information we have is available on the website, and also we have a lot of information files in the Facebook group, which are free to anyone who wants to use them. If anyone wants to contact me, they can contact me at hayden@disabilitydrivinginstructors.com email address. I'm fudging now because I don't know how much longer I've got to go. I think it's about 5 minutes.
You've got a few minutes, but I will just step in because obviously you've shared spoken about your links, so you can definitely go and share them after, put them in the comments and stuff so people go straight through. But I think I'm just going to ask you a question, actually.
Yeah.
And you touched on it at the start, but how rewarding is it? Because I can imagine how working with someone that's finding driving harder for whatever reason, physical or mental or whatever the situation, is it more rewarding in your opinion?
Yeah, it is mentally rewarding. I probably wouldn't have retired 8 years ago if I hadn't been teaching people with special educational needs and disabilities. My wife says I've become very moody since I've stopped doing it. And I'm suffering from a bit of withdrawal symptoms of the adrenaline rush of getting someone through their test, who a lot of people will turn around and say, this person shouldn't be on the road. They see someone with no legs or someone with no arms, and they say, well, that person can't drive. And really, they can. They just need the right equipment and the right adaptations to the vehicle. What we need is reliable feedback from some part of the body. It could be a shoulder movement. It could be they do the indicators by pressing a button with their knee. There are so many different variations. Of course, the more technology you put into a car, the more expensive the car becomes. But I've had a guy in there who was quadriplegic, no movement from the chest down, and he had a combined accelerator, brake, and steering wheel all operated from his left hand. He couldn't get into the vehicle. It had a ramp, so he drove into the vehicle in his power wheelchair. The wheelchair logged into the vehicle. And then once he's in that, and once he's got the control in his hand, he's as safe as anybody else on the road. Probably safer because he was in that position because he'd had someone had driven into him and he'd ended up quadriplegic. So he's probably more safe. Well, can't say more safe, but he's probably more aware of safety.
Yeah.
Than a lot of people would be as a learner driver.
It sounds rewarding. And would you say the best place people could start would be in your Facebook group?
Yeah, if anyone wants to come along, have a chat. I've said to people, I'm always available for a chat. If you want to ring me up, email me. I'm always available for a chat. I'm quite happy to talk about this subject. I do presentations to instructor groups as well. But for me, as I say, I would have quit 8 years ago if I'd have been teaching 17-year-old males like I used to teach when I first started. Everybody starts off in the same way. We're teaching the bread and butter stuff. But as you get more specialized, it becomes much more rewarding. As I say, whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD, whether it's physical disabilities, each one is a challenge. And I think those challenges have made a better instructor out of me than I ever would have been if I was stuck to 17-year-olds.
That makes complete sense. So what I will say is thank you for joining us today. It's been great to hear your experiences and to learn where people can find out more. So definitely go in the comments and share your links over there. And thank you for giving up your time today, Hayden. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Yep. Cheers.
I'm unceremoniously so they're going to kick you out now. But the next chap that I am inviting in now, this is, I would not be exaggerating if I said that there wouldn't be a Meginar without a certain Robin Bates. It was a certain Robin Bates that put it in my head last year. How are we doing, Robin?
Right, thanks, Harry. So my blood sugar's just plummeted. Can't see that. So I'm just eating some jelly babies. Don't
keel over on video.
Do my best.
San Harper's coming up next. So if you're watching, San, can you be ready to jump on just in case Robin does keel over? That would be helpful. Do you want to share your screen, Robin?
I'm not showing me jelly babies.
No, I know. Did give me a vegan sausage roll once, I think, or vegan burgers or something.
With steaks.
Vegan, sorry.
I don't know. I pinched your vegan sausage roll and I gave you my vegan steak.
For those who don't know, Robin is one of my favourite people in the entire whole world.
I'll show my screen. Stop making me shy.
There we go.
Okay.
Right, I will disappear. You've got until roughly 6:20.
Okay, well, I've had a run through. I've timed it down to the exact minute. So hopefully we'll do all right. Bear with me, folks, while I just get set up. Right. So hello. Hope you find folks are having a great Meginar. I'm Robin, the overlord of coaching for geeks, and I didn't find out my purpose in life till I was about 36. Until then, I was floating around aimlessly, a bit like, right, here's where we have to pull out a metaphor about a sat nav. You know, when you drive somewhere and your sat nav's not up to date and the roads don't exist and you just get a bit confused and a bit lost, and it's going, please do a U-turn, and you can't because you can't do a U-turn anyway. That's where I was. I was a bit lost, a bit confused, aimlessly bimbling around, and I got really miserable. At one point, I threw all my toys out of the pram. I went, that's it. I'm leaving London forever. I'm going to go and live in Cornwall on the moors and stroke my beer and stare at the drizzle. It got very, Jane Austen. But then I figured it out and I started doing the work and I started doing the stuff that aligned with my purpose. And I got much more successful, much happier than I've ever been. And it spills over into all aspects of my life now. Okay, apart from maybe the diabetes management, but we're working on that one. It took me way longer to figure out than it really needed to because I didn't have anyone showing me what to do. Gen X, we didn't have anyone telling us how things work, so we had to figure it out on our own. But today I am that someone helping other people and help geeky types with their lives and their businesses and everything to gain power that goes over 9,000. So we're going to talk about what life purpose is, what the meaning of life is. But I'm the self-styled overlord of coaching for geeks. I'm a business and life coach. I'm a host and speaker and a massive nerd. I go around the world talking about this stuff, sometimes dressed as a goose, but usually dressed like this. He says, actually, I've got the goose. We like geese. It's not important right now. So we're here to talk about finding your purpose and the meaning of life, the universe and everything. Purpose. So what do I even mean by this? Let me clear that up. It's not goals when it can be. Oh, I'm a coach. I do like to talk about goals an awful lot. It's your purpose isn't goals. It's not. If your purpose is to have a family and business success and money, what happens if you fail at getting those things? Have you failed at your life's purpose? Like, goals are specific targets and milestones that we work towards, and they can change fluidly over time. So stuff like income and clients and podcast listeners, email subscribers. Sorry about the noise. That's my blood sugar alarm going off. Everything will be fine. Things that are metrics on a spreadsheet, important data and direction markers. What are their goals rather than purpose? Because purpose lies much deeper as the why, the stuff that is compelling us to do stuff. Purpose holds steady no matter what black ice is on the road, sending you slipping around, or any goalposts that shift externally. It's the passion, conviction, and meaning, the fuel in the tank that goes behind chasing goals. Like, my purpose is helping geeky folk to live more fulfilling lives so that they can make more money and have more fun. So my goals might be to take on another 20 new clients this year, and to launch new courses and products and services and to do more marketing. But that is in service of my purpose of helping people. But the clients and the money itself aren't the purpose. I'm very, very happy to talk about goals and how to set and achieve them all day long. But today, we're talking about purpose. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This life purpose notion actually bugs the hell out of me more than squeaky brake pads bug the hell out of me. It's not as if we're all born with a cosmic a Haynes manual dictating the one true path to health, wealth, happiness, and success. That's not how it works. Here's what's cracking. We exist here on this earth for a while doing stuff and things. And some things feel truer than others. Some things feel like they're just burning rubber and killing time between pit stops. But the meaningful bits that spark joy, that help others and play to our strengths, those shape the purpose. And when you try new things, push yourself and experience the world, that helps form this idea of what your purpose might be. It's about how you craft something from your life out of your knowledge, your skills, your experience and talents. There's no pre-existing magic floating around that informs what we are. It's not a spiritual being saying what's the one way for you. There's no sword in a stone to be pulled. Gandalf's not going to turn up and set us on our life's purpose. So when people ask, what should I do with my life? Or what's my life's purpose? Here's what they're really asking. What can I do with my life that is meaningful or important to me? So ultimately, it's your life, your purpose, nobody else's. You. It's all about you. And it's not selfish to focus on you. It's important. Selfish not to focus on you. Because if your purpose is helping people and you don't spend that time figuring that out and then doing the stuff to help people, proper selfish, and I won't stand for it. So yeah, there's no singular life purpose. And we're going to turn to the first Pokemon movie for a bit of advice now. Back to 1998. I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. Thank you very much, Mewtwo. So yeah, there's no fairy godmother giving you a destiny. Like I say, no swords to be pulled from stones unless you're born into royalty or attended like the Time Lord Academy on Gallifrey. There's probably not one true destiny. And even then, it's not a given. He was born into royalty. King Harold, he took an arrow in the eye. He didn't get to live out his royal destiny. The aristocracy of France around 1789 to 1799 didn't go well for them, or with Queen Margaret II abdicating in Denmark. I hope you're getting it. There's not one true destiny, even if you're born into it. It's what you make of life that creates your purpose, your destiny. And if you do watch Doctor Who, then you'll know that destiny is malleable anyway. And that's its a fixed point in time, but we'll not talk about that. Right, so cool, 10 minutes already. Right, how'd you find it? Normally, we would spend about 10 hours talking about this stuff rather than 10 minutes. So it's going to be very much a whistle-stop tour. I'll try not to cover my microphone up. Here's what you can do to figure out your destiny. 1, do the Wheel of Life. This thing here. Terry, as you know, I've put a download together that your viewers can have. I'll stick it in the group as soon as I'm done here. It's an activity where you figure out where you're most and least satisfied with various areas of your life. You need to figure out where you are on the map before you can figure out where you're going on the map. Yeah. And this gives you data. Beautiful, beautiful data. So to complete this, download this, you have a think about each of these areas. You can change them. If you don't want to think about home, if you don't want to think about family, if you don't want to think about health, just change them for something else. And then you mark the middle of this wheel is a 0, the outer rim is a 10. Think, how satisfied am I on a score of 0 to 10 with each of these areas of life? And then you have it. You have that starting point. You know where you want to spend a bit more time, where you want to put a bit more focus, or maybe you see something that's 10 out of 10. Actually, maybe there's something in there. Maybe there's more to be done. Maybe we can turn this up to 11 by doing some more, by giving back, by figuring out what our purpose and doing something. Brill. Keeping an eye on the clock. 2, figure out what's important to you. We've all got things floating around in our beautiful internal cosmos, things that feel like unshakable laws of gravity or mavity, dictating our thoughts, our decisions, and our motivations. I'm talking about these core values, yeah? These central beliefs, these standards that really deeply shape everything that we do. And values are like the load-bearing Lego bricks comprising who we are beneath those surface layers. Take them away, whole identity structure kind of comes crumbling down faster than I won't come up with a nice metaphor here. What crumbles? A lovely apple crumble, not the crumbliest thing in the world, but you get the idea. When you identify these key pillars, whether they're made out of Lego or apple or whatever you like to picture, that are upholding our sense of purpose, brings loads more intentional fulfillment to roaming about this bonkers world we live in. You become the main character, not in a main character syndrome kind of way, intentionally advancing your life's missions that you care about, rather than being a background NPC bumped around by external forces. So it's worth spending a bit of time. Do you know what, Terry? I'll put together another sheet that you can give out so you can help them figure out your values. It's what specific standards power you: honesty, justice, joy, connection, success, autonomy, faith, friendship, respect, servitude, support. There's any of these sorts of words, ones that most resonate with you. those are your core values, and pretty much everything you do is in service to those values. So already we found out where you are on the map and what your key drivers are. Boom. Next, 3. How long have I got? Right. 3, go and do things. Lots of things. Weird things, fun things, scary things, new things, different things, old things you haven't done for ages. Do an escape room, go hang gliding, try oysters, walk a different way home, take a different route to the shops, go to a different supermarket for once, and pick up that ukulele that you bought and always said that you would learn, and then got to the E chord and realised that it's really bloody hard to do an E chord. You have to contort your fingers in a funny way, and that every song uses it. It's been some experience, obviously. Take on that challenging client, go for an early morning walk, see a film in a genre you normally wouldn't see, listen to some different music, put Radio 6 on instead of Radio 1 or pop Radio 2 on, be a guest on a Meginar or a podcast or YouTube. Do a juggling class. Just do something different and do this regularly, because you've got to get yourself out of your routine if you're going to find out what your purpose is. Human beings are creatures of habit. We're hardwired to follow paths and routines and structure. And it's great for getting us through the day. It conserves resources and keeps us focused, but it stops us from experiencing so much that's out there. So we've got this little comfort zone that we exist in, and it's really quite small unless you push against the edges of it. And the more you do, the more you try, the more you experience, the greater this comfort zone becomes. The more you're comfortable with, the more you can do. All the learning, all the excitement, all the weirdness and delight exists just beyond the comfort zone. And it's constantly closing in. And if you don't push against it, you end up some bitter old shrew who refuses to leave the sofa and only eats fish and chips and reads one paper and probably enjoys Piers Morgan. But by pushing against it and experiencing more, you get comfortable with more. You get comfortable with more people and places and things and situations. You become much more flexible. You learn more about yourself. You get a greater worldview. It just makes you a better person, really, in all honesty. And unless you try all these things, you're not going to know what your purpose is. How do you know hang gliding isn't your purpose unless you've tried hang gliding? Unless you're definitely afraid of heights, of course. And that's something we can overcome as well. Just to try. Right, 4. Right, so now that you're more comfortable, you've got to ask yourself some really uncomfortable questions. You are going to die. I'm sorry. We all are. I am. Terry is. Everyone who's speaking tonight is. Everyone watching is. Yeah, I do like to throw in a quick existential / mortality crisis in amongst the good stuff. And we don't get regenerations or save points or extra lives or continues, which frankly is a little bit rude considering how far we've come with technology, but that's how it is. So the difficult question, if you knew that you had 1 year left after that initial shock had worn off, what would you do with the time you had left? How would you want to be remembered? It's only really by facing the end game that we get a bit of perspective on what value our life really has. By focusing on not being there, you realise what's important to you about being there. What do you want to leave as a legacy? What do you want what will people say about you when you're gone? What stories will there be? What impact will you have had? And importantly, if it's different to what you want it to be, what can you do? What can you start doing to change that story? All right. Actually running out of time, so I've got a mission for you. 2 things you can do today. That's 4. 2 things. 1, Just go out and help someone, anyone, a neighbour. What do we mean by a neighbour? Anyone near you in any sort of suffering. What do we mean by suffering? The lost, the hurt, the hungry, the sad, the upset, the stress, the in pain, the in need. Basically, everyone who exists, apart from, I don't know, Beyonce, probably. 2, schedule an Explorer hour each week. Carve out that 1 hour, a recurring slot in your diary, purely for trying out something unfamiliar. From interest, maybe you've been curious about, like you want to have a little poke at, but haven't made time for. I hope you like my selection of explorers. Either way. Treat this as a non-negotiable you thing that you do, no excuses, no one gets in the way of. Although they might want to join you. And use that Explorer hour to, try that salsa dance class, volunteer walking some dogs, shadow someone in a different career, or spend some time learning something new. Scheduling this consistent yet ever-changing session removes loads of the obstacles that generally get in the way of acting on those little sparks that we get that normally just fade because we're beholden to the old routine. It accelerates self-awareness through little bite-sized engagement bits rather than overthinking and becoming overwhelmed. So show up ready, try, reflect on what energizes you, and then apply those clues like you're playing Guess Who, but all of the faces are potential life purposes. So be like the intrepid Indiana Bates here and dedicate an Explorer hour for ongoing hypothesis testing about purpose possibilities, because we do love a bit of data. Right, so you probably won't have found your purpose in the last 20 minutes. It's a little bit more of a process, and your ideas might change as you do more and try more, and that's okay. So that, my new questing pals, brings us to the close of this chapter of life's adventure. I hope you feel a little bit sparked with possibility after we busted some assumptions around purpose and legacy. And remember, we all write our own stories. There's no predestined script. So please feel free to drop me a line with any questions. If the twists and turns ahead ever feel overwhelming, or you just want to know a bit more, drop me a line. There's my email address. You can DM me on Facebook or Instagram. You can join our free coaching for geeks. I should be able to say that by now, Terry. It's been like 10 years.
Is it not becoming coaching for driving instructors by now?
Well, the amount of driving instructors I've coached at this point, Terry, is ridiculous. So thank you to you and your instructor cohort.
Well, thank you to you for coming along and delivering this to tonight. Pretty much bang on time as well, which is great. And last thing I'll mention, because it amused me greatly, at the start of this, when I said that you might keel over, so Sam needs to come in, she came straight into the waiting room.
Just in case. Sam, what a star.
There you go. So no, thank you, Robin. I'm going to unceremoniously kick you out.
Boot me, I'm done.
But it's been a pleasure as always.
Cheers, Terry, doing the driving God's work.
Right. Those of you that watch that will understand why I love Robin Bates and think he's awesome. And speaking of people that I love, we are now joined, hopefully, there we go. We're joined by San Harper, almost. We're getting there. There we go. We've got San Harper.
Turning my video off, turning my audio off. That's not very helpful. Hello.
Well done. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you for joining us, Sam.
Thanks for having me, Terry. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure to see you. But I am going to disappear. I'm going to let you kick straight on. And you've got about 20 minutes, so around about 42 minutes past would be cracking. So I'll see you on the other side.
Wonderful. Thanks, Harry. Right then, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm San Harper. I hope you're all comfortably sat in your lotus positions, obviously, because we're going to be doing a bit of mindfulness. And there is still time to light your joss sticks and your candles. Obviously, I'm joking, but time for something a little bit different, perhaps tonight, maybe a little bit different to something that some of you may or may not be used to. So I'm San Harper of the Guild of Mindful Driver Trainers, and I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit about mindfulness, mindset, and self-care. And so, just a little bit about me. So I've been an ADI for 20 years this year, which I can't quite believe myself. I still teach learners in the car. I have swapped over to automatic last year. And I'm probably best known for my course, Mindfulness and Compassion for Driver and Rider Trainers. And it's been an absolute privilege and pleasure to share mindfulness with my peers. And I've also been starting to go into some businesses as well. So it's been really lovely to share that. Okay, so mindfulness, mindset, and self-care, performance anxiety, which maybe some of us have had tonight for our presentations, and the stories we make up. So the reason I decided to talk about performance anxiety was because I had a message only last week, actually, that said this. I have a pupil who's failed 6 driving tests. It seems to have a negative attitude towards examiners. He's under the impression they hate him. He drives fine with me, but can't pass the test with an examiner. Can you help? So as you know, I integrate mindfulness into my work. And so I guess what I should start with is just to explain a little bit about what mindfulness is. So mindfulness actually means paying attention as an observer to what's happening right now, witnessing our thoughts, our emotions, sensations, urges, and our environment, and letting go of our judgments. It's a basic human ability to be fully present. And through this present moment awareness, we learn to find a relationship with what's happening. Good experiences we learn to savor and appreciate, and negative experiences we change what we can and let go of what we cannot. Mindfulness is a quality that every human being already possesses. It's not something you have to conjure up. You just have to learn how to access it. It's not about the absence of thought. By just noticing thoughts, we can learn how to unhook ourselves from our identification with them. And that's quite different from pushing thoughts away. It's how we relate to our thoughts rather than the absence of them. So we all live in our own version of reality. And the question is, what is actually real? So I was actually shared this image a week or so ago by one of the ADIs in a WhatsApp group that I facilitate. And I thought it was a really great illustration, actually, to really show kind of how mindfulness works. So when you look at this image, you might on initial inspection think that it's a series of bendy lines. When you actually look more closely, you can see that each line is actually dead straight. It's actually an optical illusion. And mindfulness really allows us to see what's there rather than merely what we perceive. So we're going to be exploring this idea a little bit more. The way we perceive things, so our perception, is what cultivates our mindset. And our mindset is formed through habitual patterns of thought. So we live our lives through a veil of concepts. So I'm sure some of you in the past have held up a bunch of keys to a very small child. Now, a bunch of keys is a concept. We know it's a bunch of keys because that's what we've been told and our past experiences tell us that. But a very small child just simply sees shiny, funny shaped objects that maybe feel cold, that might be shiny and might feel cold in the mouth. It's part of our survival mechanism where we fill in the gaps. So if we don't really understand what something is, we need to really quickly assess whether it's safe or unsafe. And the thing to really understand is that it's completely normal that we do this. We all make up stories. Our pupils are really good at making up stories, but it's completely normal. It's good to just recognize that it's happening. So I just thought we'd have a little bit of fun with this and just explore this a little bit further. The question is, what do you perceive? So some of you may have already seen this image previously. You might have seen this before. So your mind might be trying to make sense of this image. You might see one or two images. Just give you a couple of moments just to study that. So when you look at this image, some of you might say, well, it's very obviously an old lady. There's her chin. There's her mouth. There's her nose. There's her eye, and she's wearing a big white bonnet. And other participants in this session might say, "Oh no, it's I can't see that at all. It's obviously a young woman. She's looking away. There's her eyelash. There's her nose. There's her ear, and she's wearing some sort of a choker." So it could be really interesting to see that actually, when we look at this, those images of old lady or young lady are purely concepts. Because what is actually really here is dark, a big blob of dark there that narrows down here to a narrow section. And then there's other bits that are just narrow, skinny lines, and there's some jaggedy black area down here. And again, black is just a concept. It's just something we call it. So here we have another one. So we think we know how things are, the story we tell ourselves. And our mindset is influenced by our perception. So again, you might view this as possibly a rabbit, or some of you might think that it looks like a duck. The fact of the matter is, whether you see the duck or the rabbit, it's actually an image. It's brown and black, and there's dark areas and light areas. So mindfulness then, it holds up a mirror to our thoughts, emotions, sensations, and impulses, and it helps us to view them like an impartial observer, to see what's really there. I'm just going to share a little story with you now. Terry, you're going to like this. It kind of involves dogs, almost. So I was going to play you a very short film. How mindfulness empowers us.
There's a story, usually attributed to the Native American tradition, which illuminates different ways of paying attention. An elder, talking to a child, says, "I have two wolves fighting in my heart. One wolf is fearful, vengeful, envious, resentful, and deceitful. The other wolf is compassionate, loving, generous, truthful, and peaceful." The child asks, "Which wolf will win the fight?" The elder responds, "The one I feed." That doesn't mean we try to deny or hurt or kill the angry wolf. If we did that, we'd end up in a long battle, all the while somehow making that wolf more powerful through our hostility and fear. Hating that wolf sucks the strength right out of us. Instead, we calmly pay attention to the angry wolf and let go of believing they have the answers. If we can do that, they end up lying down next to us, no longer an enemy. We help strengthen the kind and loving wolf, giving it nourishment and support so that we can follow it. That peaceful wolf can become our steady companion and show us the way through all kinds of different life experiences. Restful or chaotic, enjoyable or disappointing experiences may come and go, but we can have a guide with us through it all. This is what mindfulness can help you do. Mindfulness allows us to see our thoughts and feelings as they are beginning. It's very powerful to know what we're feeling as we're feeling it, know what we're thinking as we're thinking it. With mindfulness, we can choose what will strengthen and bring into action, and we can choose what we will gently let go of. We don't have to be at the mercy of old habits or old ways of thinking or old ways of being. We are empowered. It just takes practice.
Okay. So I think that little cartoon hopefully illustrates this a little bit, make it a little bit clearer. So through mindful awareness, we see what's really there. And through that, we can then make choices which involve better self-care, compassion, and empathy, feeding the peaceful wolf. And that helps us to retain that balanced mindset. So feeding this peaceful wolf then. So we've got the situation where we've got the trigger and then we have the reaction. And what mindfulness allows us to do is just to take a little bit of time out with this 90-second pause. It allows us just to take a breath, to resist the urge to act impulsively, get caught up in the story, in the rabbit hole, in the rumination. Maybe name how we're feeling. If you can name it, you can tame it. Putting our ego aside and thinking through the consequences. So the longer exhales cause the vagus nerve to send a signal to our brains, which activate the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the calming element of the nervous system, rest and digest. and easing the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, or freeze. It's the vagus nerve then. The vagus nerve is an integral part of the autonomic nervous system. This part of our nervous system controls the things our body does without our conscious input, such as breathing, digesting food, and sweating. And specifically, the vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms our body after we've been in a stressful situation. The vagus nerve carries signals from the brain to other parts of the body, like your heart, intestines, to initiate this process. Because the thing is, a lot of the time, it's very hard to make conscious decisions about things from the cognitive aspect if we're on autopilot. We're not actually really realizing that these things are happening, because a lot of the time it's kind of happening inside of us, often without us even being aware of what's actually happening. So once we're aware, we've used mindfulness to actually become the observer. It's almost like checking the weather. What's the weather like today? Somebody mentioned earlier on, a few people have mentioned actually, it's really helpful to check in with ourselves. It's almost checking that internal weather system. We can do this with the pupils as well. I sometimes say to the pupil, what's the weather like today? And sometimes it's going to be dark and stormy clouds, and sometimes it's quite sunny and bright. There's ways to cope. So one of those ways is to move to a safe place, and that can sometimes be very literal, take them to a place that maybe is more familiar, maybe going back to somewhere that they've been before or feels a bit more familiar to them, allowing them to recenter and come out of the thought stream. And this applies to us as well. This can be really, really useful for us. It's something to do that we can do just to recalibrate ourselves between lessons. The use of the breath, so as we breathe out slowly, making the out breaths longer than the in breaths. And then moving. Some people find physical activity really helps with stress. So that can involve moving and walking and stretching. I've got several pupils that actually really like to get out of the car halfway through. And we stand at the side of the road. It's quite funny, actually. We stand at the side of the road and do our stretches onto our lesson. That could be really helpful as well. And listening to understand, listening to ourselves and to them as well. So really listening to see what's actually going on. Quite a nice acronym here, SOPHIA. It stands for false evidence appearing real. And this is the thing, it's often the story we're making up. And this is when it can be really helpful to recognise, it's that story again. I'm making up that story. Over time, trait mindfulness can occur, and it can hopefully become part of our personality, and that can involve informal or formal meditation practice. It's almost like taking the mind to the gym. If you want to become stronger physically, yoga, obviously, there's other things you can do to become physically stronger. But meditation, formal and informal practices can help us to have more control over where we rest our attention. So that really helps with how we pay attention. We begin to notice the story we're telling ourselves. And that gives us space for choice. Which wolf are we deciding to feed today? We're going to be falling down that rabbit hole and feeding that unhelpful story. And that really helps with memory. When we practice mindfulness, we're actually enhancing the parts of the brain, such as hippocampus, which help with things like memory and our ability to sort of understand, and less reacting on autopilot. And that obviously leads to emotional intelligence. I should say that breathing techniques and mindfulness isn't for everyone. It should always be an invitation. It's not like I'd say to people, right, okay, we're going to do some mindfulness. It doesn't quite work like that. It's always worth having a conversation if you think it's of interest to you, and you think it might be of interest to your student. I'd always just check in with them with regards to how they feel about breath awareness. Some people aren't comfortable with paying attention to their breath, so it's worth just checking that first of all. And also, I would never invite somebody to close their eyes in a small space. I can feel quite, some people might be quite vulnerable with that. The invitation would be to close your eyes or soften your gaze, whichever feels okay for you. But like I say, it's always about having a conversation, finding out what they know, whether they're interested in exploring, with us as well. We don't know all the answers. They might be interested in starting to explore some mindfulness techniques. And some of them might already have their own mindfulness practice. But isn't mindfulness for hippies? I hear you cry. I don't think it's really for me. It kind of makes me laugh. The reason I put that is because some people have got maybe preconceived ideas, perhaps, about what what it is or the type of people that it might appeal to. Just useful couple of little facts and bits of information. When Michael Jordan was asked how he was able to transform his on-court leadership and lead the Chicago Bulls to 6 NBA championships, he attributed it to a pretty unsuspecting character, George Mumford, his mindfulness meditation teacher. And since the late 90s, there's been a rise in published research on the topic of mindfulness-based interventions. It's really popular in sport as well, and more popular. It can help both sports-related coping skills and athletic performance. High trait mindfulness is associated with reduced competition anxiety, higher self-efficacy, and sports confidence, and subjectively better able to perform. And obviously, taking the test is a little bit about how we perform on the day. So self-efficacy refers to an individual's belief in his or her capacity to execute behaviours necessary to produce specific performance attainments. Self-efficacy reflects confidence in the ability to exert control over one's own motivation, behaviour, and social environment. So to summarise then, mindfulness, it helps us and our pupils to recognise what's real and the story our minds have made up. So, for example, the image of the bendy lines or the straight lines, and the examiners, the story about all the examiners hate me. And then we can choose, we create space for choice, to self-care, to choose how to respond rather than react on autopilot in a way that supports us and our students. And it can be really helpful to explore what works for us and what works for them. Everyone's going to be different. So that idea of self-care can just be really good just to explore that. And then the mindset, well, obviously practices that feed the peaceful wolf to cultivate a more positive outlook. So obviously that's hopefully going to be the end result. I'm just looking at the time. I was hoping I might get time to just guide you with a really short practice. I'm very mindful. I might have a minute or two. I'm sure Terry will pop up on the screen if I don't. Oh, yes.
You can have 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. So just to invite you then, if you'd like to, this might be nice for the people that are on after me, just to sort of just centre and ground yourself before you speak. So let's just take a moment, shall we? Just to close the eyes or soften the gaze, whichever feels okay for you. And let's just take a moment, just have a little check-in with how things are for us right now. Just perhaps having a sense of the space that you're in at the moment. Just noticing where your feet are rested on the floor. Just settling into that space, perhaps noticing where you're postured in your chair, the way that you're connecting, your sitting bones in your back. Just checking in with how you're breathing, just noticing whether that breath is shallow or if you're able to just extend the breath just slightly, if that feels okay for you. And as you breathe, just having a sense of just letting go of any tension or holding that you might be holding on to. Often we hold tension in the jaw or shoulders. I know as an ADI, it's something that I've experienced is pain through muscle tension. Just having a sense of just letting go. Just tracking the air as it comes in at the nostrils and the slow release on the out breath. I'm very mindful that this time we have together is limited, but it's good to know that the breath is always available to us. It's something that we carry around with us. It's always available. So we just need that, just a few seconds, just to check in with ourselves. Just inviting you now, then, just to gently open your eyes if you had them closed. And I will just share this screen. Obviously, one of the courses I deliver is mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it's just good to know that there is help out there, not just for ADIs, but anybody else really that needs it. There's just a little bit of information on the screen. And obviously this has been recorded, so you have a copy of that. So thank you. I hope that was of interest. Thank you very much, Terry.
Always of interest, Sam. Always of interest.
Excellent.
And I don't know why, but I feel really bad kicking you out. I think it's because of you're like the, I don't know, I don't know how to describe it. I feel bad kicking you out, but I'm gonna kick you out.
Bad kicking me out. Brilliant. Good luck, everybody. I hope it all goes well tonight. Thanks.
So let's get rid of San. Now, San Harper, one of the loveliest, calmest, warmest, most compassionate, most considered people you will ever come across. Dan Hill, exactly the same. You would think of those exact words when thinking of Dan Hill: calm, compassion, warm, considerate, all those words. How are we doing, Dan?
I was just thinking about what Sam was saying about, being mindful and thinking about my breathing and my posture. And I'm sitting here with short, sharp breathing, getting, anxious about performance today. So, you'll have to excuse me if I'm a bit jittery. I need to take some of her advice, I think. But yes, I'm very well, thank you.
Another one with performance anxiety. That's fine. Do you want to share your screen for me?
I can try. Yeah. Let's try one.
There we go. Did you want me for anything before we start?
No, I think we can probably crack on.
Okay. If you can be done by about 7:02, that would be amazing.
Right. I'm just going to set my timer so that I don't overrun. I'll do my very best. So yes, thank you, Terry. Thank you everyone for joining Terry's Meginar, and to Terry for inviting me on to talk to you for a little while. Obviously we've only got 20 minutes. I'd like to talk to you tonight about going digital with your business and what that really means. So my name's Dan Hill. I'm the founder of My Drive Time. It is a business management app in its most basic form. That was launched back in 2014. We've been pretty quiet over the last couple of years while we've essentially replaced our original version that we launched back then with a brand new version. So we're really delighted with how that's going. But it really, I think, when I think about this industry and why we started this in the first place, it was because primarily it was a very paper-based industry. That's what I'd like to talk to you about tonight, if that's okay. So a little bit about me. I have 25 years business development experience. That essentially means helping businesses by using software to solve problems, I guess. I'm married to a driving instructor. She qualified back in 2008. It was really when she qualified that I realized quite how bad it was when her accounting company sent her a whole wad of paper documents in the post. And I just thought, that's madness. How can anyone really properly perform and know where they are financially if they're recording all their data on paper? So I set about creating My Drive Time. As part of my journey, I've been working with the guys at ADO&JC. I'm very proud to be the business team leader on the governing committee of the ADO&JC. That's again, it really gives me a platform to try and help to push this message forward. Working with the Intelligent Instructor as well in the past, so there's about 4 years worth of monthly articles on all things business, of which obviously digitalization is one of those. And of course, I've hijacked the Instructor podcast logo there as well, because from time to time I appear on Terry's. So anyway, that's about me. Let's move on swiftly. Why digital matters. So the first thing I think to make this point right, that data helps us to know things, right? Data tells us things, and that knowledge that gives us power. It gives us the ability to make decisions that we might not otherwise be learned enough to make. So, and obviously, the more data you have and the better you use it, the more you can see and do. So that's the first thing. Data is sensitive. So the data that we record, whether it be on the back of a fag packet or whether it be in a system like ours, we have a real responsibility to look after it, for ourselves, because it helps us to make decisions. The tax man is very interested in the data that you record in terms of your income and expenses. And our customers are, it's important to our customers as well, sensitivity there, because GDPR reasons, right? They entrust us to look after their very, very sensitive personal data. So I think it's really important that when we think about the difference between sort of a paper solution, digital solution, whether or not digital can really help us to do a better job of that. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh yeah, I've always used a paper diary and it's never let me down, and I don't see any reason why I'll change." And I say to them, "Well, the problem is nobody, and they say, I've never lost it." And I say, "Well, you've never lost your diary until you lose it, and it's at that moment when you lose your diary, because you've left it on top of the car when you've driven off for a lesson or something, when you finally realise quite actually how important it is to sort of look after the records." So yeah, data sensitive. It matters to our customers, kind of for the same reasons I already said, really, but not only in terms of the way that we look after our customers' data, but also because of the way that we share information with our customers. I'm a big advocate, believing, and I think if you truly asked your customers whether they would prefer paper-based records and lesson records and cards and things like that, or whether they would prefer all of the data relating to their driving to be in a smartphone app, they're going to choose the latter, because they organize their lives on smartphones. So it matters to them why that digitalization side of your business matters to them, because it's about the way that you share information with them. It matters to our profession. I've said this because, and this is really a bit of a bugbear for me. All right, we all want instructors within our country to be taken seriously, and for the industry to be considered as a profession. But turning up to a lesson with an unwieldy sort of paper diary and pen in order to record sensitive information about a student and in the delivery of your service and the payment, receipt of their money, doesn't really do much to further that cause. So I think when we are considering whether or not we want to be really bullish about the use of paper, it's worth thinking about how it looks to the outside world, and whether we really look particularly professional in using paper records. I can't think of another industry in the world that runs its business using paper, especially the admin and the business management side of it. Okay, so maybe give that some thought. I said it matters to you here, and even though some people might be scoffing and going, "Well, it doesn't matter to me. I'm quite set in my ways. I'm perfectly happy with my paper, thanks, Dan." What I would say is that it does in the bigger context of your life, right? So you drive a car that is very complex. You teach people how to drive cars that are very complex. That car runs on about 100 million lines of code. Right, that's what it takes for the car to operate. And we think to ourselves, well, okay, I can use that piece of technology, and that is a very digital piece of technology, or I can walk. Why don't I just walk everywhere? And we choose to use the technology and learn how to use it because we know that it's faster to drive, and we know that it's arguably safer to drive, and it provides us with opportunities that we wouldn't get if we were walking. And I think that's a bit like my drive time and what I do. For me, it feels like, by putting data into systems like ours, it enables your data to be usable, faster and safer, and it provides you with opportunities, tells you things you wouldn't otherwise know. And I think that probably the most important thing to come from this is that if you don't digitalize your business, if you don't use the best possible tools available for you, others will. And if others do, then you're going to end up struggling and you'll end up getting left behind. I always use the analogy of two students sitting at college in the rec room, and a third one comes up and says, "Hey guys, who are you learning with?" And one goes, "Yeah, I'm learning with Instructor A." And Instructor A, look at these cards that they've given me to tell me all my progress and when my next lesson is. And student B says, "Yeah, I'm learning with this instructor, and look at this cool app that they've given me in order to be able to manage my learning journey." Who's that third student going to choose as their instructor? I think is a pretty obvious decision there. And the most important thing probably is that it's soon going to be mandatory. And we're going to come on to what making tax digital is later and why that matters to us, not necessarily today, but why it matters in the future. So I am currently, goodness knows how far I'm in. I can't even see my phone, that's turned off. Right, so let's just whiz through. Now, I've titled this slide in the beginning because I think it's important to recognise that this isn't an attack on you guys. I'm not trying to suggest that you're doing anything wrong, that you're bad, and that you've been any kind of failure in that regard, because you haven't. Right? it's typical for most instructors that when they have been trained, they train you how to be a very good driving instructor and how to deliver that training to create safe drivers, but they don't really provide you with much in a way of business training. So the business element of what you do, ultimately you are a business, you provide your service to instructors, and as part of that you need to run a business, and of course that's not something that's very forthcoming with a lot of people who provide training. So I think it's perfectly okay for you not to know about these things. It's not your fault. I think if you don't take action, then you could argue that it's your fault, especially if later on down the line it causes you trouble. So I hope that you'll go away and think about this tonight. It's very typical for us to stick with what we know, right? Paper is a 1900-year-old technology, and we're using it from when we're a year old. So it's natural to choose that, I think, as a standard. And I asked Terry earlier, I said, what did you use when you very first started? And yeah, pen, paper, pen and paper is just easier, right? And I think that's because, we think that the very bare minimum of record keeping is just to record it, just to keep a record. But actually, as soon as you put data on paper, it's what we call dead data. It really just sits there. It doesn't do anything, doesn't interact with any other data, doesn't really tell you much. It's just there for you to reference when you need to come back to it. Paper, generic calendars, DIY systems, they're all the same. They are a means to an end, and they're usually what we know. But they might be easier for you, but they are certainly not better. I think they limit your potential. But I haven't got time to go into more detail. Can do. Thinking like a consumer. So based on the conversations I've had over the last 12 years of being in this business, being in this industry, is that a lot of people come to me and they think very much like a consumer. They think about buying things as they would do in their normal life, in their normal personal life. So they have a very consumer mindset. They look at cost of something as opposed to the investment of something, like somebody who runs a business does. And it's really important to focus on value, not cost. So when we're looking at digital solutions, like, okay, well, why would I go out and buy a sat nav, or why would I do that when I can just use a map and point to it? Well, you do, because actually the value that sat nav gives you when you make full use of it is far better than a standard sort of paper map and being able to draw on it. Focusing on cost restricts your ability to grow, right? Businesses are about investing money in order to make higher and greater returns. And I think it's really important to do that. And technology will help you to make that happen. It's about, things that you need to know. What do you need to know to be successful? And it's about helping you to make better decisions, it's about helping you to avoid problems, helping you to share data with people. And it's very difficult to do that when you record it all in a sort of analog paper format. Okay, it doesn't really allow you to do any of those things. People see the admin side of running their business as a burden. I see it as an opportunity. The more data you can bring in, the more you can consume, where people are coming to you from, how long it's taking people to learn to drive, where so for perfect example, right? We have a standards check indicator. So we allow you to input into My Drive Time all of the test results forever, but we look at the last 12 months very much in the same way that DVSA does when it considers your eligibility for standards check. And putting that information in means that our customers get to see, they get to know where their students are picking up faults, right? So that's first and foremost. And I know you can say, well, okay, I can see that from the email, which is fine. You can know that. But what we do is, by taking all that data for the last 12 months worth of tests and fusing it all together, we can start to build a picture. We can start to tell a story about how your students broadly across the spectrum are doing, where they're picking up faults, where you might then want to take that information and adapt the way you train. If students are picking up more faults on roundabouts than anything else in their test, then it might be that you want to adapt your training, be better at delivering roundabouts, ask a peer if they can sit in on a lesson and help you to adapt, so that you can then deliver better. Student passes test, you get higher pass rate, you get more business, everybody's happy. And you can only really get that if you use data to be able to paint a picture for you of what's going on. So really important. It's not a burden. Actually, putting it in might feel like it, but what you get out from a system like ours, as opposed to paper, very much is an opportunity for you to benefit. Right. I know this is a bit contentious. I've said here, is technophobia actually a code for lazy? And I say that because quite often, Terry, and listeners, I get people say to me, I'm not sure, I'm technophobe, I'm not really good with technology and all that kind of stuff. And I think actually that's not true. And I'm actually going to sort of hop back to something that San said, where she used the analogy about fear. And I've written it down here: false evidence appearing real. And that is the false evidence that, okay, well, it must be difficult. It must be difficult for me to learn. It's on a small computer and I don't know if I can. You're never going to know if you can unless you take yourself out of your comfort zone. So what I've done here is I've actually just stolen a bit of what Robin said in his presentation as well about getting uncomfortable, right? And saying, look, do you know what? I look at my phone and it puts me off. I'm not sure. It's something for kids. Ask us, ask me. I will sit on a call with you on Zoom like this, and you're perfectly capable of doing this because otherwise you won't be watching it. So you're perfectly capable of joining me on a Zoom call, and I will walk through this stuff with you, right? I promise you I will do that for you. But you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. You have to be willing to come out of your comfort zone. Do more stuff, like trying a digital solution as opposed to just going, nah, papers are right. I think I'll just stick with that. And if you don't try it, you won't know, right? And that's really important. And another final thing that he was saying about impact, about the impact we're going to have on our life. If you save time on your admin, if you have better solutions for managing this side of your work, you'll have more time for impact, whether that is delivering more training, spending time with your family that you might not otherwise have, right? So really important. So sorry, Robin, but thank you also, because I've nicked on that. Putting data to work. So I just want to have a quick conversation. Terry, you haven't given me enough time. This is bad. I'm sorry, I'm rushing. This is an example, right? We have a student, we take payments from a student, we deliver lessons for a student. If you put all that data in different places, if the student details are in your phone and the lessons are on a record card and the payments are in a spreadsheet somewhere, that data and the information doesn't talk to each other. It just sits there, basically sleeping. It's only when you put it all together in one system, like ours, whereby all of a sudden this data starts to link together. Lessons link with students, students link with payments. When we ask the question, if I was to ask the question now, how much time does Joe Bloggs have available for lessons? If you can't pick up your phone and instantly tell me within the case of 5 seconds, you are wasting time, then having to go off and try and find that information and calculate it and go, I don't know, I'll have to scrap back through my thing to see if I can find the answer to that. So if a parent comes out and asks you that question, it doesn't look great when you're just sitting there going, I don't know, I'll text you later. Because A, that's another admin job for you to do. And B, it's not great that you can't instantly answer that question. With a system like ours, all of that data talks to each other, right? So essentially, by fusing all that data, we can say instantly how much time they've got left available before more payment is needed. And for me, I would have thought that's a pretty compelling reason, if for no other, to start considering using a system like ours. And more to the point, you can share that information, right? We have a student app, and as soon as you make a change on this app, as soon as you add a lesson and book a lesson in for a student sees it on their app, and it's really important. I'm being really quick, but it's about knowing it, right? Knowing this information securely, instantly, and anywhere. Are you likely to take your diary with you on holiday? No. When a student contacts you while on holiday and you've got an app and it's in a digital solution, it's much easier to be able to instantly deal with that and handle it. You might argue that you don't want to because you're on holiday, but that's the point. Right. Embrace technology, customer expectations. Customers expect digital solutions, right? If you went into an accountant's office and you had one accountant that's using a computer with the latest technology, and you had one accountant that's still going to do your tax return on an abacus, which one would you choose to work with? So have a think about that. Again, we can't expect to make all these benefits from technology across the world, and everything that we do in the toasters we use to make our toast and the TVs we use to keep our entertainment. They're all technology. And then turn around and be so willing to dismiss for something that is important is our business and our ability to make money, and just dismiss it. It's not right. Customer expectation is really important, right? So give that some thought. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Technology is only going to go forward, right? And if you don't adapt, you'll get left behind. And if you get left behind, you'll find it harder to earn business. I know it's easy at the moment because waiting lists are completely full. I get that completely. But just think about it, right? If you don't, it's an adapt or die thing, really. I think it's ultimately designed to help you. Some people say to me, I don't want to use it. It's too hard. It's too difficult. It's going to take too much time. It really isn't. I think that, again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier. It's about what appears real. And ultimately, it doesn't take time. Okay, I'll scratch that. It takes time for you to pick up the phone and say to me, Dan, can you just help me out? Can you just show me what you've got and how it works? Because I know that I need to do something, but I don't know what. That's where the conversation starts, right? And I promise you we'll be here to help. We have done since 2014. We're here to help. And it's just more professional, okay? So I really urge you, embrace the technology. It will change your life. And And also practice what you preach. You know, you spend all day in a car teaching somebody how to use a sophisticated piece of technology to make their life better. So I know we can do that for you. Whether it's us, whether it's anyone else, doesn't really matter. Just digitize, because it will make such a big difference. Finally, making tax digital. I know, Terry, I'm running over. Making tax digital is a new scheme that the government is putting in place. Typically with your tax return, you are used to, you know, keeping receipts in a shoebox somewhere, getting to the end of the year, panicking about it, sending information to your accountant who puts together your accounts, tells you how much tax to pay, job done. The government don't want to work like that anymore. They're saying we need to know more regularly what our likely income is going to be, and you need to tell us more regularly about your income and expenditure. So you will need to submit quarterly submissions, right? You won't need to pay tax quarterly, but you will need to submit quarterly submissions. And then at the end of the year, you'll have the typical kind of May till December to finalize your return. And at that point, pay your tax. Okay. That's how making tax digital works. But what they're saying is that in order to do that, in order for them to know, you have to submit that data quarterly through approved software. Okay, you can't do it with paper. You can't just send them a shoebox of receipts and go, yeah, that's what I've earned this month or this quarter. It doesn't work. So my advice to you is, you know, try and change your mindset, put yourself to the side, get in touch, and we can tell you how to prepare for this. It starts in 2026 if you're lucky enough to earn more than 50k, 2027 if you're between 30 and 50. If you earn less than that, you're not going to get away with it. They're just going to review how it goes initially and then come back with something else later. We'll be ready. Will you? Thank you. Now let's get digital. I didn't actually think of that song when I wrote that line, but I did it's now in my head. I can't take it out of my head, Terry. It's your fault. Blame you. But yeah, look, my contact details on the screen. I think unless Terry has stopped sharing my slide. But yeah, there's a barcode there as well. You can scan that with your phone if you like, and it'll take you to our website. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was worth it just for the song. I have to say that if you'd have removed every time you'd said, Terry, I don't have enough time, you would have had about 3 minutes spare.
Very possibly. That's the pressure you put. It's performance anxiety, isn't it? I need to get San back on, and I need to, you know, she needs to session with you, San, please.
There's drugs that can help with that, I believe. Either way, I am going to unceremoniously kick you out, but thank you for that presentation, Dan. As with all, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
No problem. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Let's kick you out, and we're going to bring in a man that is, I would say, equally as handsome as Dan Hill. Probably more intelligent, probably a better singer. It's Ray Seagrave. How are we doing, Ray?
Hello, good evening, Terry. I am fine. I don't think I'm going to burst out into song, but you never know what might happen in the next 20 minutes.
I don't expect you to do it, but it would be a bonus if you did. Do you want to start sharing your screen for me?
Yes, I will do.
Just everything's working okay?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
So I will just say we are running a few minutes over, so not a big problem because last time we were about 45 minutes over. But if you can be done by about 7:25, that would be awesome, Ray.
Okay, I will do my best. Let's see how we get on. Thank you, Terry. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great being here, and I've really enjoyed the last hour or so just listening to some of the speakers. And I thought tonight I'd share something with you that affected me and got me really thinking about the job that I did. And I wanted to talk about that, but also how we can really help pupils through how we coach them to understand their own beliefs and how that then might impact on risk. So I thought I'd just put a little something together. It's a little bit of a whistle stop, but you can always contact me and I'll talk to you about how you can do that at the end. Okay, so just let's move this on. So a little bit of a warning. I'm going to show you a video clip. This is the clip that I saw quite some time ago. And yes, some might find it a little bit upsetting, but I think it's worth a watch. Because as well as that, I found it both motivating and inspiring. And it really gave me another insight into, and if I needed it, a little bit more motivation as to why we do the job that we do. So I'm just going to play you this and then I'll talk about it afterwards. This is about Zoe.
It was a Thursday. I remember that very clearly. I was a 13-year-old kid. The last thing I said as I went out the door to Zoe was, "I love you."
I can't remember saying goodbye to her.
I can't remember the words the police officers actually said to me. They just said Zoe had been killed.
I grew up 10 years in a second.
She was on the A1 and she was approaching some temporary traffic lights.
A vehicle came up behind them at 60 miles per hour, didn't see the traffic lights and didn't brake at all.
The pillar where the seatbelt is fixed, that had caved right in on her and killed her, so obviously she'd died of head injuries.
I knew that there'd been an accident and somebody had been arrested and he'd been on his phone.
People use the word accident. It wasn't an accident. It didn't come about by accident. It was a road crash caused by somebody doing something that he shouldn't have been doing.
I pity him because he has to live with the fact that he took someone's life.
Every single day it affects me.
Everything comes in packs of 4, and all of a sudden there was always one thing left over.
I kind of miss being told off by my mum. Benjamin, Paul, Carvin, get to the top of the stairs right this second.
And it really is the little things you take for granted that you wish you could do now.
From time to time, I often talk to her, telling her about, things that have happened, things that I've done, things the children have done, how proud she would be of us all.
Everything died on that day because that man decided to pick up his phone.
There's nothing that is so important it cannot wait. Don't use your phone whilst you're driving.
Okay, so how can we stop things like this happening less frequently? This is one example, and I'm sure we can all cite our own examples when we're talking to pupils about risk and consequences. So how can we do that? So yes, they happen less frequently, but maybe even not happen at all. Wouldn't that be great? So what must we do better? What is it that we can do that will really help us to change that statistic that comes out every year? What is it we can do? What will have the biggest impact on how pupils drive after the driving test? Well, let's have a look at what we normally do and what we normally teach and what we mainly teach. We teach car control skills. We teach decision-making skills. We teach pupils how to move their car around the road network. We also teach risk and consequences of actions, both good and bad. And hopefully we don't just teach them to do the things to pass a test. So do that and you'll fail, do this and you'll pass, and let's go on a test route. So if we do all these good things, then why do we still see so many instances of poor, reckless, aggressive, dangerous driving every time we're out there on the road with pupils by our side? Why are young teenage drivers still killing themselves and others? Why is that the case? Why do we still see the problems we see every day on our roads? Why is that? And why do we see so many drivers still on their mobile phone? Why do so many families of those killed, why do they have to ask why? Well, what's the answer to all those questions? Well, I think there is a slight problem, and that is that the driving test really is only it's a skills-based assessment. It doesn't really cover a pupil's behavioural competences. So things like a test would not cover would be something like emotional control, stress management. They're not tested for that. Avoiding aggressive behaviours. They're not particularly tested for that. Maintaining focus and not being distracted. They're not tested on how good they are at that. Taking responsibility for their own actions when things go wrong. And having a safety-first attitude. They're not really tested for that. And dealing with distractions and how they do that, both internal distractions, maybe with the phone ringing, they're not tested for that. Adhering to all traffic laws. Yes, they've got knowledge, they've got understanding, they know what they are, the ones that we've talked to them about, but what are their potential for actually sticking to them? Understanding the impact of driving decisions. They're not tested on their knowledge on that. So when we drive safely, what is it that we do then? Because we're not thinking about the skills. So how do we do it? Well, the thing is that we know that the skills have been learned, and they've been learned through repetition and experience and repetition and repetition, and they've been memorized. They've also into our muscle memory. We don't have to think about them too hard, do we? We just do it. We are making decisions around the why we drive the way we do. It's our behavior that keeps us safe. So when skills are learned, safe driving is a belief. It's a behavior, not a skill. It's what our beliefs are telling us we should do, what we are motivated to safely do in any situation, how we reflect on what we are doing at the time and what might become, what's just happened, what went well, what didn't go so well, what might I need to do differently next time, how we learn from experiences. So the big question is then, for me, the big question is, how much of your lessons are focused on developing safe driving behaviors? How can we do more of that? Okay, so let's have a look at that. Another question is, well, why wouldn't you rob a bank? Well, there's lots of reasons why I wouldn't rob a bank, but we understand why we might not do that. Some might say, well, we wouldn't want to hurt anyone. We wouldn't want to shoot anyone by accident. And that might be their main motivation. Some might say that there are consequences to that. If I get caught, I might end up incarcerated for quite some time. So there are consequences around that. So there are lots of things motivating us as to the reasons why we wouldn't do that. It's against the law. We don't break the law. So it's not something that would even be within our consideration. But people do rob banks. So I want to discuss with you what I've put together as my 5 behavioral truths that we can talk to pupils about. The first one is that in general, most people in a democratic society like the one that we live in, we obey the laws and rules that we believe in, because we understand that that results in a peaceful society. Now, we might not agree with some of the laws, so we might lobby Parliament, we might get the law changed, but in the main, we agree with the laws in our type of society. The second thing to consider is that it's the risk of being caught by the police and punished that in our society reminds most people that, there's some laws there and the consequences are, and it reminds most people to obey the law. The third behavioral truth is that when deciding something, we tend then to ask ourselves, and drivers do this, I would say, what is the law? What's the speed limit on this road? In Wales, maybe it's now 20. Do I think the law is right or wrong? Don't agree with that. No way should it be 20. Perhaps that's maybe what they're thinking. What do I risk if I do not follow or disobey the law? What is it that would be a problem for me? And is what I'm doing a risk for me? So considering that, we're then on to the fourth behavioral truth, which is really that most drivers who take risks, they understand what those risks are, but they still engage in the behavior. So why might that be? And finally, the fifth one is that just simply telling young people, young adults and teenagers not to speed or show off in front of their friends because the risk increases, that's not enough. They must be motivated not to behave in that way. Okay, so let's have a look at the 5 key coaching skills that we use in order to look at this particular issue. So number one there on the left, we've got listening. So we're listening to our pupils. We're listening for what their understanding is. We're actively listening. We're listening to learn rather than answer. We're trying to delve into them as a person, what their beliefs are, what their understanding is. And we might be using our intuition for that, number two. So we're picking up on what the unsaid things are. And that might be how a pupil responds to certain situations, how they might talk about or even start to think about slowing down for a speed camera before they get to it. Then we're using feedback. So we're using feedback either on the drive or at the side of the road. We're getting feedback from the pupil, and then we're giving honest, positive feedback on their progress or our opinions and our views and our beliefs as we talk about the things that we need to talk about. And then we're using coaching questions and questioning and the right type of question and effective questions used at the right time to help pupils learn. And those questions will have an agenda from us. You know, we're looking to try and really understand what it is our pupil is thinking and what it is that they're experiencing and what's their reality of the situation and what is it they might need to do differently and what are the risks and what are the consequences and what are their beliefs around those risks and consequences. And then we're doing that in this nice, safe environment where there's good rapport, there's developed trust, because we know when we've got that relationship with the pupil that they are more likely to tell us some of the things that lie deep within their own belief system, the things that we really need to know so we can help them understand a different perspective. So that non-judgmental approach about what their current beliefs are is crucially important. We're not judging them. They come from a different place. They come from than we do. They come with different experiences. They're surrounded by different social and peer groups. So that developed trust is important that for that part of that conversation. So if you put those together, then I've determined something. I put something together here called the coaching triangle, where we've got all those things together. But the reason I put it in a triangle is there are three things that we are doing in the main. Our focus is really helping people understand that there's a relationship between three things. It's the relationship between behavior, actions, and risk. And it's all around what our thoughts are, what our beliefs are. We drive the way we do because we have a certain understanding of what risks and consequences are. We have experience. We might have seen that. They are real to us. We're motivated to do certain things in a certain way. There's a professionalism about what we do. We're seen out on the road. Maybe there are inner drivers as to why we act like we act, why we do the things that we do, why we are like to be seen to be saved, and the benefits of being that. And that's our thoughts and our belief system. But they're also affected by our feelings and emotions. And they're also connected to our actions and behaviors. So let me give you an example. Every day we see, unfortunately, we see risky behavior on our motorway system. We see cars traveling behind each other at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, maybe 2 car lengths apart. And those drivers that are doing that, they might be thinking, their thoughts and belief system might be that, actually, I'm all right here. I'm safe. I do this lots. There's never been any consequences before. So therefore, I feel calm. My feelings are such that my emotions are such that I don't, I'm not frightened by anything. I've experienced this a lot. And so therefore, with that thought belief system, then the actions and behaviors won't change. So they stay 2 car lengths back at 90 miles an hour until there's an event. And then hopefully a consequence of that event, if they're still here with us, they think about their actions. They learn from that experience. Maybe their thoughts and belief system is now changing. And they're thinking, actually, I'm not safe doing things like that. I don't want that to happen to me again. I'm risking everything here. I want my kids to see me again. So I'm going to change my behavior. My actions are going to be different. And then that is then going to lead me to feel much calmer about the situation. So we're helping our pupils understand this connection between how we think and our beliefs, the way we act, and our feelings and emotions. We talk a lot about anxiety and nervousness, and how anxiety and nervousness can impact on people's actions. Think of the times that maybe a pupil's gone to test and all of a sudden they've broken down with anxiety and nervousness. Their actions have changed, and the result is that they've unfortunately failed a driving test. And they might have thought all the way along, I knew it was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. So we have our pupils, and we have our pupils' thoughts, and their behaviour is based on what they might do and what we might do as human beings. Is based around our morals. So, what we believe is right and wrong. Can we actually do it? Our attitude towards things. So, do I like it? The thrill seekers might do something in a certain way because they like the thrill. How will it make me feel? I like the feeling like that. I like the adrenaline rush. What are our social norms? So, do others normally do it? How often do we talk about drivers following each other and they're all doing the wrong thing? And we use that following the sheep example. So do others normally do it? If they do it, then why can't I? There's a thought belief that's now changing. And then there's the behavioral controls, so the things that control our behavior. So, and these might be internal to us and our own belief system, or they might be external. So an internal thought might be, well, do I have the skills to do this? Do I have the skills to go this fast? Is anything stopping me from doing it? And if it's external, is there a police camera around the corner that might be stopping me from doing that? So all those lead to an intended behavior, and the actual behavior will depend on our experience. And over time, that might change. So what can we do better? Do better to reduce poor and reckless driving decisions. We must get better at helping pupils understand that themselves, understand their morals, what they believe is right and wrong, understand what their attitudes are towards things. Also understand the things that control their actions, and why might that be? Their behavioral controls. As well as that, their thoughts and their beliefs and how they impact on risk. How is what they're thinking right now going to make the situation safer or more dangerous? And the things that influence their behavior, their friends, their family, their social groups. What happens when they're off to a match on a Saturday and they've got the fans in the back all excited about the game ahead, and there's lots of noise in the car? That's a massive distraction. How might you deal with that? So how the decisions they make impact on their crash risk. We are helping them change their beliefs and understanding. We're raising their awareness of risks and consequences that are personal to them, that mean something. So many people out in the world out there are quite quick to point the fault or point the blame at someone else, when actually what we're helping our pupils recognize is taking on responsibility for our own actions, because to do that, there's a personal impact on us. So we're giving them more informed choices. We're helping them make choices, and that's what coaching them is about. Once we've raised their level of awareness and understanding, and we've talked to them about risks and consequences, we're doing better by giving them choices. Because behaviors cause crashes when all the skills are learned. So we focus on life after the driving test, the post-test conversation.
I'm just going to have to give you a little nudge, Ray, just to hold on a little bit.
Literally 5 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes, deal.
Yep. How will you drive after the driving test when I'm not with you? Is a great question. How might you drive differently with your friends, on your own, with your family in the car? How would you drive when you are late for work or late to catch a plane? How might you drive in an emergency? What is your opinion on speed and speed cameras? Is that different from other drivers you know? And why might that be? How might you drive when you are angry, excited, sad, in a high emotional state? What might you do to keep safe? What are the consequences when you take risks and do what you can do rather than what you should do? And what will you do if your friends don't put their seatbelt on or encourage you to engage in risky driver behavior? How will you deal with distractions? Distractions like your mobile phone. And what is your opinion on the law and the rules around driving? And the big one, why might you park? Where might you park on the schoolroom when you're running late? So using effective coaching questions is a powerful way of getting to a pupil's thoughts and belief system, because it's helping them understand what are the risks, what are the consequences, how they personally affect them is a big part of how we can help them change their behavior. They then become better, safer drivers, because ultimately it's not about the skills. Yes, the skills will be learned. It's what they do next with them. Thank you, Terry.
No problem, Ray. Thank you for that. It's quite, I don't know, emotional at the start there, but yeah, some good stuff, and I do appreciate your time. And I always feel getting nudging people along, but we do need to move on. So yeah, big thank you for joining us today. It's very much appreciated. And I am now unceremoniously going to kick you out, but feel free to go back into the comments, share any links, answer any questions on the comments over there. So yes.
Thanks, Terry. Good luck.
No problem. Thank you again. And I am going to bring in the next guest, who is Paul Mountford. Now, I have had, much like Gemma Briggs earlier, very little to do with Paul. So, as previous, I'm just waiting for him to start his video on unmute. But as previous, always feel a bit guilty when there is somebody who I don't know very well, and I'm just going to usher them in, send them on the way, and then kick them back out again. But do you want to, there we go, sorted. So thank you for joining us tonight, Paul. Very much appreciated.
No problem, Terry.
Do you want to share your screen for me?
I will try. After doing years of Teams, I'm just trying to get my head back into this now, so I think I might be able to do that.
There you go, nailed it.
Wow, that's impressive for me, I can tell you. Is that, oh, can you see that?
Yep, can see that Onkidori. So I'm going to take myself off the screen. If you can be done by 7:50 at the latest, that would be amazing.
No worries. Okay, shall we start?
Yep, all yours. Off you go.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Mountford. In fact, I'll click through my presentation and see we're doing a lot of talking, I guess. As you can see, I'm a retired police officer, and I spent a lot of time in Merseyside Police, specifically in the traffic or roads policing department, as it later came to be known. I now work at Wirral Council on a road safety team. I'm one of the team leaders there. Still very much involved in the field of drink and drug driving. When I was in the police, I was the force lead and the lead trainer and responsible for the introduction of the new drug drive laws in 2015, which I'll talk about a bit more later on as we go through. I still train police officers, mainly in the northwest and the north of the country, at the request of DTEC, who produce the drug-like 3S devices, which you're probably all aware of. They're all over the internet and social media. That's what the police, virtually every police force in the country uses that type of equipment. I'm also a director of a CIC, a community interest company. That's a not-for-profit company, which I jokingly do in my spare time, but because I don't have any spare time, I don't do very much with it. And you can tell by looking at my website, it's very out of date. So I still do that as well. Request. My main focus really within my current role is trying to improve road safety in workplace, schools and colleges, and that's do a lot of talking, basically. That's what that means. So I gave this presentation 6 months ago to a group of driving instructors in Coventry. And I guess it was the thing that triggered Terry to ask me to come and do the talk. So I've used it again. I've got some updated data to add to that as we go through. So mainly talking about drink or drug driving, what the law says about it, what the police can and can't do, what you can do as a driving instructor. So just some headlines. Going back to 2021, that seems a long time ago now, considering we're in 2024. But in England and Wales every day, there were over 200 drink and drive cases. That will have gone up, I don't know how many fold since then, in the previous in the subsequent 2 years or so. Since that year, they really have escalated significantly. I can only comment on Merseyside Police's figures. I do know that Greater Manchester has seen similar figures. Yes, every metropolitan force in the country has seen similar. It's a major issue, and it's described as an epidemic on the roads. No doubt responsible for many more road deaths than we know about. Drink driving is also showing a bit of a spike, nowhere near in the same scale as drug drivers. So back in 2011, I used this for comparison. 2011, had a drink drive campaign over Christmas, like every force did, and we actually arrested 18 drivers for drug driving. That's 18 drivers, and we were one of the leading forces in the country with our 18 arrests back in 2011. And 10 years later, that rose to 251 drivers. I can tell you that last year, 2023 at Christmas, number of drug drivers was 469. It's just since that's in 2 years, over a 6-week period. It's a really shocking rise. Can't do the percentages. Somebody with a maths, a bit more interested in maths could do that for me, but it's a sharp rise anyway. It's almost double, isn't it? So it's incredible. And that's not just affecting how the police the roads. That's having a knock-on effect on other areas of policing, because I know that certainly in Liverpool, most police patrols are doubly crewed. There are 2 officers in every car, and every 3rd drug test results in an arrest. So 1 in 3 drug tests that they perform result in an arrest, and that's 2 to 3 hours spent in a custody suite for both those officers. And if they're arresting the amount they are, that's a lot of police officers who aren't patrolling our roads. That's not just affecting drink and drug driving, that's affecting crime as well, and antisocial behaviour and all the other things that go with it. They're not on the roads where we need them to be. In 2023 altogether, police actually arrested 2,730 drivers in Merseyside for drug driving. 2,730. That's an average of 53 every week. So you can get a scale of 53 every week. That's 2 officers off the road for 3 hours. Do the sums. How many officer hours is that? That's time spent away from frontline policing. So the police really do need to find a way of addressing the issue. And these are just the people that we're catching. Seem weird. I still regard myself as police. It doesn't account for the many that the police don't catch. It's probably a scarily enough. Might be a drop in the ocean. So it was called Operation Nemesis years ago. It's now called Operation Limit. You can just see there the rise since 2015. That's when the new drug drive laws came in 2015, March that year. So nearly 8 years ago. You can see the rise year on year in the numbers of arrests at Christmas time. Like I say, it went up in 2022 again. Last year, it's now 69. So that graph's going to show an even steeper climb, I guess. We add the columns to it. So I'm almost done with the stats, promise. So back in 2015, when the new drug drive law was introduced, the police conducted 1,888 drug tests in Merseyside. Almost half were positive. 8 years later, it doesn't sound like a big increase, actually, from 49 to 52.8, but it is an increase nonetheless. A lot more tests and a lot more arrests, obviously. So still quite scary stats, really. So drug drivers, and what people have a stereotypical image in their heads about what does a drug driver look like. At least I hope they don't anymore. I'm hoping we've moved on from this, but this was news to a lot of people. Generally thought the drug driver stuck out like a sore thumb, but any one of those people nowadays, they are all being arrested, whether it be someone in a corporate job, somebody driving a professional driver driving large vehicles, logistics companies, and not just your typical person in a shell suit, which is a bit dated for Merseyside. So there's lots and lots of drivers from different backgrounds being called by the police. We did some work some years ago, and we identified taxi drivers as being a particular issue, believe it or not, drug driving. They tend to work very long hours, sometimes double shifts. They don't go to bed at all for 24 hours or so. 12 hours, and then they'll go and work for somebody else and do another 12 hours. And how do you think they're going to keep themselves awake doing all those hours of driving? It's like cocaine, and they were being caught. As a result of that, we did some work with Liverpool Council, introduced random testing for their drivers, and with Wirral Council, who I work for now, didn't at the time. We did talks to every single taxi driver on the Wirral, and they saw a sharp drop in numbers of those detected. That was just spending 30 minutes with taxi drivers, up to 100 at a time, giving them the information that they didn't know, basically. It's not about putting the finger at people, it's just about giving them information and letting them make the right decision. So some examples, these are taken from custody suite booking in sheets, basically, just to show you some examples of the sort of incidents that police are dealing with. This was a case in Kirby in Liverpool, where a vehicle was stopped because it had a faulty light. Driver was stopped. Officers requested a preliminary test for drugs. It was positive for cannabis. The interesting thing from this really is the occupation, professional driver. The time of day, unlike drink driving, where you traditionally see evening time, overnight, particularly at weekends, you tend to catch more people drink driving. With drug driving, it's any time of the day, any day of the week, 25 to 11 in the morning. Another case again, mid-morning, 11:15, computer engineer, professional, stopped because they were speeding. This was a case of cocaine. And again, this one, it was a collision with a large vehicle, HGV, which tipped over and rolled onto its side, early hours of the morning at 4 o'clock. And the significant thing with this was that the driver was negative for drink and was over for cannabis. He stated he'd had the cannabis 2 hours earlier. So in the previous 2 hours, been driving significantly under the effects of cannabis. Just lucky that he didn't have a crash before. He had the one that he did, basically. So, and on the 57 BMW, again, stopped at speed. That was cocaine. Early evening, middle-aged male, a courier for a multinational company. So these are the cases that the police are seeing, and there's been a sharp rise in the number of collisions. Obviously, with more and more people being caught drug driving, there's also been a sharp rise in the number of casualties and collisions, which is quite alarming. Certainly in Merseyside, we've not had our figures confirmed here for 2023. That will take some time yet. The indications are that they've gone up quite sharply in 2023, which will cause some concern. So a little bit about the law then. The Road Traffic Act, Section 3A, highlights the offence of driving whilst unfit through drink and drugs, causing a death by driving carelessly while unfit through drink or drugs. What people often don't understand, I often say to people, if you get stopped by the police, if you've been drinking, you get stopped by the police and you're found to be below the limit, so you're not over the legal drink drive limit, you can still be arrested for being unfit to drive. If anyone's ever drank alcohol very quickly on an empty stomach, maybe a glass of champagne or 2 or 3, come to a party, if you've not eaten anything, it can have a significant effect on the way that your brain functions very, very quickly, because it's gassy, got lots of air in it, it gets around your bloodstream a lot quicker. It's an effect much sooner. And 2, maybe even 3 glasses of champagne may not put you over the limit. Certainly 2 probably wouldn't, but it would make you feel very lightheaded and giddy, and you'd be unfit to drive. It's the same with drugs. Although we've got limits for drugs nowadays, even the smallest amount can mean that you're unfit to drive. And even if you pass roadside drug test, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to walk away. Section 4 is the offence of being unfit to drive. As I've said before, limits don't apply to 3A or 4 offences. So the officer has any evidence at all, somebody might be impaired, then they can be arrested, regardless of the result of a breath test. Or 5A was the law which came in 2015, which introduced limits 17 different types of drugs. And they're listed on the screen. I use this slide with the police because it's really important in drug drive cases that the officers obtain an evidential sample ASAP, that sample gets analysed ASAP. And this is possibly the alarming thing with the drug drive arrest figures. I've not seen them nationally yet, but I have a feeling that most of the arrested people, they actually don't actually get to court and get banned, because the volume of cases is such, and the numbers of labs up and down the country is such high. There's not many of them. I think a lot of cases are being lost because the column on the right there indicates the length of time it takes for the drug that's in a person's body to reduce by half. And if you look at cannabis, which is the fifth one down, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, the limit is very low, 2 nanograms, but it'll take 2 hours to reduce by half. So if somebody fails a drug wipe, that indicates they've got 10 nanograms in their system at the point of test. Now, if it takes 2 hours to get into a custody suite and get a sample, that's already reduced by half. Generally, these are general rules. Depends on how much they take and what sort of cannabis. Potentially, we could be losing a lot of cases. And even when the sample's been taken, kept in the fridge, it's still degrading, albeit very slowly. And then it could be sat in a laboratory for a week or two. It's still degrading. And all the time, we're losing evidence. So yes, we're getting a lot of people through the courts, but I think we're also losing a lot of cases as well. There's a lot of food for thought for the police there, really. So you'll see at the bottom of that list there, some of those long names. They're drugs that you can be prescribed by a chemist, things like morphine, temazepam, oxazepam. You can legally use those drugs, but they are listed in the section 5A and have a limit on them, albeit the limits are very high, as you can see. Take the bottom one, temazepam, that's 1,000 nanograms to cannabis, which is 2, or LSD, which is 1. So any amount of the illegal drugs is likely to result in a positive test, whereas the legal drugs that you can use, as long as you follow the directions on the packaging, don't overdo them, you should be able to take those particular drugs to treat a medical issue, not fall foul of the law. So the police can conduct breath tests, field impairment tests, and drug screening tests to see whether somebody has alcohol or drug in the system and whether they might be over the limit for that particular substance. These tests can be conducted if someone is driving or attempting or in charge of a motor vehicle. And if the officer suspects they've got alcohol or drug in their body, they're committed what we call a moving traffic offence, such as speeding or red light or not wearing a seatbelt, or they're driving a car which has got a broken headlamp, or they've been involved in a collision. The officer can carry out one of those preliminary tests. So what does unfit mean? It means that their ability to drive is for the time being impaired. Doesn't necessarily mean they need to be falling over, drunk, stable. It just means that the officer can get evidence from the way they've been driving the car that they may be impaired. And that's a quote from the CPS London policy lead, which again indicates that the police actually don't have to see erratic driving. They can simply form the opinion from the person's demeanour at the roadside as to whether they are unfit or not. So the benefits of Section 5A, it brings drug driving in line with drink driving. It does generally mean a bit more clarity. So if someone is over the limit, that's an offence per se, and they will be punished in the same way as a drink driver would do, with similar penalties. It's not always a speedy process in custody, but it's usually quite good. And again, the doctor doesn't need to assess the person's condition, provide the positive drug test. That's enough for the doctor to take a sample. There's a list of drugs listed in Section 5A, which I mentioned that earlier on, which can be taken for genuine conditions. And there's a defence built into the law which indicates that if you are taking one of those drugs for a genuine medical condition, so long as you're not impaired by the drug, you've got to get out of jail card, I guess. You wouldn't be penalised in the same way as and the driver has taken illegal drugs. And the police use, you can see the photo on the screen, that's a drug wipe, and that particular drug wipe test indicates positive result for cannabis. You can see two parallel red lines. Two parallel lines indicates positive test. The police only test for two drugs, cannabis and cocaine. There aren't any other tests that they can use to test for other drugs at the moment. That may change in the near future. So if somebody has taken, for example, ketamine, and they are tested by the police, of course, they're only testing for cannabis and cocaine, so they should pass that drug wipe test. The officer can then conduct what they call impairment tests, to test whether their ability to drive is impaired, to either walk along a line or stand on one leg or push the nose. They look a bit Mickey Mouse, but there's some science behind them, and they're really effective, and they do paint a really good picture because the officers record all the tests that they do. And it's a simple question then of going to court and playing the tape, so to speak, and let the magistrate or the judge decide on whether that person who couldn't stand up straight was safe to drive a car. I mentioned earlier about education for people, and I'm heavily involved, I'm nearly finished now, in a scheme called Engage, which works with driving instructors to deliver, I wouldn't say a better quality of driving lesson, because I'm sure driving instructors do a great job, but we actually give the instructors a lot of coaching to give them more confidence to talk about topics like this, drink and drug driving, which sometimes you might not be too comfortable doing. The idea is to better educate people so they can make an informed choice once they pass the driving test. So just dead on almost dead on 10-2, Terry. So I hope that was okay for you.
Bang on timing wise, I'm happy with that. That's great. And also really good presentation. Again, I know I've seen it before, but did enjoy it, and I'm sure that some of the folks watching will as well. So yeah, big thank you for joining us today. I'll share links for Engage and stuff like that in the group. Yeah. So if anyone wants to go and find out more, they can do. Which is
I also, Terry, have a leaflet. You can't really see it on the screen. It's called Fit to Drive. It's got a lot of information in it about different drugs and the laws and the limits. And if anyone shows any interest in wanting some of these leaflets, I've got them here. I can post them out to people if that means it helps them deliver a better lesson, if you like, on this particular area. So be it. If they're interested, let me know.
Cool. Well, a lot of thank yous come in the comments, and I'll put your details up so people can reach you. And a big thank you for today. And I am now going to unceremoniously, as I have done with everyone else, kick you out. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Terry. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so last but by no means least today, we are joined by the one person in the industry that probably likes to promote themselves more than I do. And you can probably guess who it is by me saying that, but I'll wait a moment until he brings himself in. Weirdly, and I don't think this clicked with me before, but the on the first Meginar, Lee Jowett was the last presenter, and now it's Mick Knowles. How are we doing, Mick?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Terry?
I'm not bad. What time is Traitors on?
9 o'clock, I think.
Oh, we've got plenty of time, right? You've got hour and 10 minutes if you want it.
Brilliant.
No, don't. I want to get Papa John's. All right. Do you want to share your screen and we'll make sure we're good to go?
Yeah, just give us 2 seconds, man. I'll just see what I'm doing.
No problem. But yeah, I'll just mention while you're doing that I didn't realise I had Leon last time. So Kit has essentially main evented both of the Meginars so far, and that was unintentional. There we go. So,
should see now.
Yep. I am going to stop my video and I will put myself on mute. I'll let you take it away. You've got about 20 minutes. Enjoy yourself.
Cheers. Thank you, Terry. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So I'm Mick Knowles, one of knowledgeable instructor trainers, Terry said, with Lee Jowett. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover scaling. It's a little, you might have noticed from Facebook, it's a little bit of one of my sort of bugbears. We sit in a lot of lessons and we listen to people scaling, and basically all they're doing is plucking a number out of the air and that's it. So we run workshops on this, but when we speak to people outside of the car, it's, oh yeah, I use scaling, I know how to do it. But then when we're in the car with them, it's totally different. And as I say, they're just sort of plucking a number out of the air or out of somewhere else maybe, and that's it, and there's nothing else about it. And it's not the PDI or the ADI's fault. It's those that have told them how to do it. So what I'm going to do over the next 10, 15, 20 minutes is just to go over our scaling model. So we've got two. We've got search and we've got smooth. I'm going to go over smooth. It's a fully comprehensive scaling model, and it basically helps them scale the doing part, the skills. Okay, search, that one is specifically for the being, okay, the thoughts, the feelings, that sort of thing. Okay, so what does scaling actually do then? So it helps us evaluate. It helps the it helps the learner evaluate. It helps them take responsibility, and it also encourages safe driving for life. Okay. So let's look at smooth itself. Let's break it down. Okay. And yes, smooth at the top there is wrote in two different colors, and I'll explain why later on as we go through it. So the first bit, the S, obviously the scale. The scale, generally, what we find is 0 to 10, on a scale of 0 to 10. But sometimes people might use 0 to 5. It doesn't matter. They can even use different things like, I don't know, football teams, chocolate bars, anything that they want to use to scale it. It doesn't have to be 0 to 10. But what you need to do is you need to define which is good and which is bad. Okay? It's a little bit like a pack of cards. Is the ace high or is the ace low? So on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is rubbish, poor, and 10 is brilliant, that's what we mean by defining it. Okay. However, this step, the scaling, is the least relevant to the purpose. What I mean by that is the scale doesn't really matter. Okay. That figure it doesn't matter. All it is, it's a way in for the pupil to evaluating. So we're getting them to scale where they think they are, so that then we can help them get into evaluating what they've actually done. Okay. So the scale is a reflection of their ability. Okay, of what they think they've done, how they think they've done. It's not our role to judge. What I hear quite often is the PDI or the ADI saying, "Oh, are you sure? I thought that wasn't a 7. I thought that was more a 4." Or, "Oh, I thought that was better than a 3. I thought it was an 8." It's nothing to do with us. It doesn't matter what they score themselves. Okay, I've even heard somebody say that when you tell them it's not an 8, it's going to demoralize them. Don't tell them. Don't tell them. It doesn't matter to me, to you, to us what they score themselves. So scaling is all about evaluation and self-evaluation. Okay, so we can use that scaling to help them evaluate. But the important part comes next. So the scale is not important, but what is important is this that comes next. So the M, measure, we're going to measure what was good, what made it an 8, what did you do well, etc. Okay, so that's the first question we're going to ask. Something along those lines. What did you do well that made you score it a 7, an 8, or whatever number they gave it? What we might hear now, though, is, "Oh, I did that wrong. I did this wrong." So we might hear negative comments coming back, what they didn't do so well. What we must do at this point, though, is stop them. We don't want them to go into the negatives, into the development areas yet. We want them to concentrate on the positives, on what they did well. So we need them to, we need to ensure that they evaluate what they did well, not what they didn't do so well. And this is important because they need to understand their strengths. We're our own worst critics. So the first thing we're going to want to do is talk negative, but we need them to evaluate their strengths, so that it gives them that motivation, for want of a better thing. Okay, if they know what they've done well, they're going to be more motivated. Not only that, they're going to be able to think, "Hang on, I can do this again because I can do it well. I've thought about it." With the evaluation, we need to be thorough. So we need to get them to be thorough when they're evaluating. So ask deeper questions, get them to think a little bit more. So they might come out with, I slowed the car down well. Okay. What else did you do well? Why did you do it like that? What else could you have done? Or what else would that have helped? Is there anything else that you've done? So we're asking them more questions to get them to evaluate what they've done and what benefits it's had on them, and what they've and how they've dealt with whatever it is they're doing. So ensure that they evaluate thoroughly. We can add input if we need to help with accuracy. Okay, so they might think something has happened, it's not quite as they say, so we can then help with that accuracy, just to make it known that they did it like this. Okay, so that's the M, the measure. The next bit is the O, and as you can see, this is the final bit of the pink. So the O is the opportunities. Okay, and what we're looking at here is what opportunities there are to develop. So this is the negative points, the development points. This is where you can let them evaluate what didn't go so well. Like I said at the beginning, if they come out with it at the beginning, we've got to stop them, get them to talk about the strengths, the positives, and then later on, when we come on to the first O, the opportunities, now's the time when we can get them to talk about the weaknesses. And it's important, once again, that they know and understand their weaknesses, because these are going to formulate what they need to develop in their future goals. And also, they can then formulate a plan as to how they're going to tackle it. And we'll come on to that shortly. Once again, the same with the strengths. Make sure that the evaluation is thorough. So asking the questions around what, why, what else? How did that affect it? Okay, asking these questions. Once again, we can add input at this stage for accuracy. And if you think about these two elements of the measure and the opportunities, these mean that the initial score that they gave isn't important. Okay, it's not important. This is the important bit. What's the reason they gave themselves that score, and what they need to work on to develop? So the strengths and the weaknesses. That's the important bit. So if you think about this now, the 3 pink letters, the SMO, they give that evaluation. That's all this is for. They've evaluated what they've done well, what they haven't done so well. So we now move on to the green, the second O. And the second O is options. So we're now looking at options to develop. What are they going to do? You know, in the opportunities, there might be 4 or 5 different things that they've come up with that need developing. But we're now going to look at the options to develop. So which one or ones are they going to develop? How will it work? How will they do it? How are they going to implement these changes to make it better? What's the logical order? If there's 2 or 3 things that they think they need to develop, which order are they going to do it in? And it's important that if you think about that, they develop these things in the right order. You know, for example, let's look at the approaching a roundabout. And they've got 2, let's say they've got 2 development points of the approach speed and finding the gap and entering that roundabout. Now, they've got to sort out the speed first before they can tackle getting on that roundabout. So the logical order would be approach speed and then the roundabout, getting onto it. So we need that logical order. Then, similar to what I've just said, what do they want to try first? Let's go and try that. It might be that they want to try something out of order, you know, that's not in the right order, but I can help them by, for example, slowing that car down so they can deal with it. But what do they want to try first? Once they've tried that, what's next? What are they going to do next? So if you think about this, what they're coming up with now is a plan. They're coming up with their own plan of what they can do to help them develop. Yes, we can add input where necessary to help them out. Okay, we can add that input. But our role in all this is to help them figure it out and get it right. It's not our role to actually tell them. Let's help them. Let's facilitate this and help them work it out for themselves. If they can't, then we can interject and give some advice. But let's see if they can do it themselves. So that's the O, the options. Now I'm going to move on to the T, the time. The time is quite important. So we want to ascertain a time that they want to spend improving or practicing this. It doesn't have to be a figure, a time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be that. It could be a number of attempts. So, for example, it could be a maneuver they're doing, or it could be roundabouts, and they want to do 3 roundabouts, or they want to do 2 bay parks, or something like that. So they give themselves this time. And one of the things with this, if they put a time on it, or a number of roundabouts, they will push themselves then, because you know if they've not got it right after 2 roundabouts and they've given themselves 3 roundabouts, they're going to put everything into that 3rd roundabout to try and give them that development Okay, it's part and parcel of what we do. We're competitive, or most of us are competitive in some way, shape, or form. So the timing is important. It could even be how far into the future will it be. For example, it might not be something that we can get done today. It might be something later on that takes a little bit longer. As I've mentioned, the time frame gives that motivation. It gives them that sort of that push to go and really put everything into this last attempt. And I've seen this every time I use scaling with my learners. I see this the last time they really do put everything into it. This next bit is important. So we've got to ensure that reflection follows practice. Practice and reflection is how we learn. We don't learn, we don't develop by just practicing, keep going and going and going and going. We learn from practice and reflection. So we've just, let's say that the learner has said they want to do 3 roundabouts or 3 junctions or 3 turning the roads or whatever it is. After we've done that, we need to pull up and we need to reflect on what's just happened. So we go through the scaling model again. What we don't want to do, and I mentioned this on our workshops, is I was sat in the back of a car observing a PDI, the first time I'd seen this PDI, and they were doing junctions. And we went round this loop. There was 3 junctions in this loop. It's about 400, 500 meters. And we went round it, I think it was 14 times before they stopped. I ran out of pen marking it down. I believe it was 14 times, and they stopped. And then they discussed something, but they never went through a scaling model. They just carried on again and then went round and round and round again. So short, repeatable loops, and this fits into it. Okay, so we do a bit of practice, we stop, we reflect. And as I've just said, this then forms the feedback cycle. And it's the feedback cycle, it's that reflection where that learner is going to develop. The H then, help. So, help if any, okay? They might not want any help. They might want to do it themselves. However, they also might say they want to do it themselves, but let's just say you've just had to duel them coming up to a roundabout, and then they turn around and say, yeah, I can do it myself. Are you really going to let them do it themselves? So you need to be aware of that, and you need to be potentially asking a slightly different question than do they feel they need any help? You might want to say, what I'm going to do is I will help you by X, Y, Z. Okay, so you're giving them how you're going to help them and get that confirmation from them. So do they feel they need your help? Do you feel they need your help? And ensure that this is an agreement between yourself and the learner. But remember, as I've mentioned, we're responsible for the overall safety. So if you think you need to help them, you've got to help them and tell them. Remember, though, that over and underconfidence are factors in collisions. Okay, over and underconfidence are factors in collisions. So if they're a little bit cocksure, we might need to want to give them a bit more help because they're too confident, and vice versa with the underconfidence. And then finally, accept that not all pupils want to get a 10. I quite often hear, what are you going to do to get a 10? Don't ask that. Not everybody will want to get a 10. Terry will. Okay, and that's it. Thank you for listening, guys. There's all my contact details on our websites up on the screen now. And if you've got any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll get back to them later on tonight or maybe tomorrow. Cheers, Terry.
Well, I think the first question I need to ask is, how would you score that presentation? No, thank you for that, Mick. Another presentation I really enjoyed tonight, and do appreciate your time. And yeah, feel free to go back into the comments after traitors, and share your links, share anything like that you want in the comments, in the group, anything like that. But yeah, big thank you for joining us. And
cheers for setting all this up, Terry. It's great.
Love it.
A little apology for myself. Sorry if I sunk down. My chair's broke just before this, and it keeps dropping down.
I didn't notice. So with that, I think everyone's that transfixed on the presentation, we won't notice. But now we're going to go back and watch it again just to see. And then I can make a video out of that. But yes, I am going to kick you out now. So thank you for your time.
Cheers, Terry. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm just going to grab a few minutes before you all disappear, because first of all, I want to say a big thank you to all the guests, all 9, that I won't remember, so I'm going to read it. Emma Cottington, Gemma Briggs, Hayden Jenkins, Robin Bates, San Harper, Dan Hill, Ray Seagrave, Paul Mumford, and of course, Mick Knowles. So big thank you to those guys. Also want to mention that at the start of this, I said that we're relying on technology and we're relying on people. The people have definitely not let us down. Say the people have provided. The technology has stood up. There is still time. I haven't finished yet. But so far, the technology and the people have provided. I also want to mention this, actually. This is the second Meginar, so that's 18 guests that have come on, 18 different guests. And I think that's brilliant. 18 different people that provided this wealth of content. And there has been no hiccups. There has been no hitches. No one has turned up late. No one has cancelled. No one has walked out on me. No one has no-showed. Again, how cool is that these people are willing to do this and be that efficient? And I think I do just want to mention one thing, actually, just on that before you all disappear. I was not worried, that's the wrong word, but I think I was concerned that someone was going to pull out for this one. And again, people messaging me saying, can I step in? Can I cover? Can I help? The rule, and that's great, by the way, but the rule for this Meginar is I never want anyone on twice. However many of these I do, whether this is the last one or there's another 17 or whatever, I never want anyone on twice. And that's no disrespect to anyone else, but I want the fresh blood. I want fresh faces. That's kind of the idea behind it. You've heard several people say today about not having enough time. The idea is 20 minutes, here you go, learn about this person, then go find out more. So anyone you've liked today, make sure you reach out to them, whether it's on a message or an email or a pigeon that drops, carrier pigeon, whatever you want to do. Also want to thank you guys for tuning in. We've had some decent numbers tonight. I really appreciate you all coming along. I'll be completely honest, I was hoping for more. But we, kind of nice, solid 45, 50 all the way through. So thank you guys for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. It is recorded. You can go back and watch it again. There will be a better version in the premium content, obviously, because these guys are paying for it. And also with the audio version in the premium content. But yeah, all that. There will be a questionnaire that I put up probably tomorrow, but possibly a little bit later, time-wise or whatever. But this is completely free. You do not have to pay anything. You do not have... I was joking when I said buy me a Papa John's. You do not have to buy me a Papa John's. But the thing I ask, please fill out the questionnaire or at least send me some feedback. And yes, whilst I love it, when you tell me what's great, tell me what's not so great, what you don't like. Want to point you in the direction of the Instructor Podcast WhatsApp channel. If you've not gone and signed up to that already, you don't have to sign up. Go and follow the Instructor Podcast WhatsApp channel on WhatsApp. I think that's going to be a really, really good resource for everyone. I think that's going to be somewhere we can post links and snippets and bite-sized chunks. I think that could be, excuse the wording, a game changer. So go and follow the Instructor Podcast WhatsApp channel. Driving instructors to Vision Zero. I'm going to mention this because this is my big thing that I am doing this year, driving instructors to Vision Zero. I'm aiming to bridge the gap between the driving instructor industry and the road safety sector, because there is a gap. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little not sneak peek, but sneak behind the scenes. I have been talking to some people within the road safety sector. They are really excited about what the potential is for this. They're excited about what can be done. I need you guys to be excited as well, because I can bring these guys over. If you guys don't match that, I'll put it bluntly, we're fucked. This may be the chance to bridge this gap, and if we don't, we're screwed. But keep your eyes out for Driving Instructors 2 Vision Zero. Big thank you for you guys for listening. I am going to go and get my Papa John's now. So all that's left for me to say is you've done it today, but let's keep raising standards.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.